Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Agent Psycho, aka ToSniper98. It's about that time of the year again. I've been making these videos for long enough that y'all should already know what's up, but in case you're new around here, let me tell you how it's gonna go down. I'm gonna cover every single servant, yes, every servant released so far in NA/FGO, going by class and alphabetical order. I'm going to tell you their rarity, their dominant card type, and their role, and whatever relevant tips and tricks I happen to have in regards to them. For those of you who've been watching this annual series for a while now, this is going to be a bit different from previous years since I usually make separate videos for 4 and 5 star servants, but this year I decided to put them all together for a change of pace. And lastly, before we get started, the usual disclaimer I give before every one of these videos: this is not meant to be a tier list of any kind. I'm only here to tell you how to use these servants in case you have them. Most tier lists for FGO are trash anyway, unless it's about booba size. Alright, got the boring shit out of the way, let's get into it, starting with the Sabers. Altera, 5-star Buster DPS. Eofi traded out her paintbrush for a laser pen sword thing that kind of looks like one of those pens that has multiple colors in it. She can also call down an orbital strike with it, making it the world's most dangerous multicolor pen, but sadly she doesn't have that in FGO. And yes, I will make as many VTuber references as I fucking want, thank you very much. Whenever she's not going around hunting down anything she considers bad civilization in Rio land and having spontaneous bouts of depression, Altera smacks bitches with big juicy Buster crits and wave clears with her Buster AoE NP. And even though she hasn't gotten a buff in a few years, that's okay, her costume's the only buff she really needed. Proto Arthur, 5-star Buster DPS. There was once a time when he was pretty forgettable since he was basically Saber who had a super specific niche against big chungus enemies, so for a time he was only popular with the ladies and anyone else who had a thing for generic blonde 90s superhero protagonist archetypes in anime. Then DW realized that he has the same voice actor as this motherfucker and gave him 2 amazing buffs, so Proto Arthur went from a virgin with a niche no one cared about to a gigached who can now buster crit people into the fucking dirt because crits don't care if you're a big chungus or not. Seba, 5-star Reloader. The main character in FGO besides herself, despite not actually having any direct influence on FGO's main story because developer bias is one hell of a drug. Remember that one time when Delightworks said that they didn't want Saber to be too prominent in the game since FGO's story wasn't supposed to be focused on her? Yeah, me neither. She was already a top tier farming Saber with all the buffs that she's got, but now that Tomovich is finally in the NA beta server now and made busters great again, Seba is now firmly one of the best buster reloaders in the game. I guess DW must have realized that they were starting to power creep her with all the other 50% charged Sabers and decided they couldn't have that, so they released Tomovich to make her absolutely top tier again. Salter, 4-star Buster DPS. Imagine actually being part of a pseudo-singularity in FGO yet still being inferior to your 5-star original. That's almost as bad as Sachin still not having her own route in the Tsukihime remake, well, at least not for now. She did get a 20% battery as a buff, which is actually pretty meaningful now that Appen skills are a thing since JP's 6th anniversary, but she still can't reload meme with Tomovich. Not that that should matter since she's finally got her Shinjuku outfit, so just go and click some big red cards with her all you want. Saber Lily, 4-star Buster DPS. Kinda. Her issue still is and has always been the fact that her attack rating is god fucking awful, and no matter what DW tries to do to buff her ass, it's still not gonna suddenly convince people to start using her if they already haven't been. Not that this should matter since Saber Lily is a cute little potato and no one should tell you otherwise. Bedivere, 3-star Buster Flex. This is a man who simped for his king so hard he burned out his own soul living for over 1,000 years or some shit just so that he could return her sword to her. Whether he's now a fully fledged gigachad or still a pathetic virgin is up to you to decide. Regardless of what you think though, Bedman knows how to slap a bitch real good with that silver arm of his, and his single target slaps hurt a lot considering he's only a 3-star. But he not only attack but also protect, just like Pestley's chat whenever he goes AFK, with a 30% party defense buff. He mostly attacked though. Benny Enma, 5-star Arts Flex. DW took Gordon Ramsay and turned into a Japanese burb lolly who shits on your terrible cooking skills and goes dechi. She also may or may not be a direct ancestor of this little guy. When she's not calling you an idiot sandwich, Dechi can give a big ol' 50% attack buff between her 2nd and 3rd skills to her team that also comes with a lot of other utility too. And if she needs to, she can blow anyone up who's chaotic evil with big NP damage so long as they're not archers. She's kinda like Klee with a sword. Kinda. Chevalier de Aeon, 4-star art support. Chevy is Chaldea's resident trans rights activist and an unusual taunt saber who uses her 3-turn taunt to keep her team safe so that they're free to get their NPs ready and do whatever else they need to do, all while keeping herself topped off to lessen her own reliance on her teammates. She also has a utility MP, which is also unusual for Sabers in case she somehow gets her MP charged. They're best used in art stall teams, which aren't as meta as they used to be, but are still pretty potent if you're still willing to waste a couple of hours of your time doing a quest that you could have done in 5 minutes or less with Scotty loops, but hey, you're listening to a guy who rolled MP10 Scotty and still has 0 bond on her, so don't let me stop you. Diarmid, 4-star quick DPS. Even in his proper class and as a 4-star, Diarmid still gets shit on by DW by having a kit that's so vanilla that he could be put under the vanilla tag on Sad Panda or N-Hentai when he should be under the NTR tag instead. He's also only single target too, so not even Scotty can drag his ass out of bottom tier like she did with Dondo. But hey, there are some people out there who simp for Proto-Arthur before his buffs, so I'm sure there are DR mid simps out there too. Liz Brave, 4-star Buster, DPS? I think? If you don't count her third skill, I guess? If you ever wanted to play a gacha game inside your own gacha game, Saber Liz is your girl with how dumb her third skill is. Yo dog, something. Despite effectively having only 2 skills, Aloe's long-lost cousin doesn't let that stop her, just like how having an outfit that could make her the protagonist of some shitty hentai game made with RPG Maker that goes for 500 yen on DL site doesn't stop her from basically turning FGO into that exact premise for her event. And for what it's worth, she's also a single target saber with an MP that ignores defense, which is unusual to have among sabers in general, and she's welfare. Good luck ever getting her again though, not that most of you would care given how most people feel about Liz faces. Fergus, 3-star Buster DPS. Brock's still having a hard time getting laid ever since he became a servant even after 4 years. Some things just aren't meant to be, Omega lol, I guess. He's the only 3-star Buster with a Berserker deck, so even you free-to-plays out there can experience what it's like maining Leo in Strive. But seriously though, his Unga Bunga playstyle combined with his defensive buffs make him a surprisingly good anchor for your team in case you're bad enough at the game to let your entire frontline get wiped. Saber Fran, 4-star quick DPS. Fran's here to teach you about the importance of energy conservation while you're in jail for making a young girl walk around in public in nothing but bandages. And no, saying that Moriarty was the one who gave you that idea isn't gonna get you out. Her main gimmick is her first skill, which at the cost of 10% charge to herself gives her a hilarious boost in MP gen. Use it with her arts card, preferably with a crit to go with it, and she charges her MP faster than you can go to jail. Otherwise, she's got a buff removal effect that makes her a convenient plug suit saber against enemies who like spamming their skills. Caesar, 3-star quick flex, which makes me sound like a fucking zoomer saying quick flex, oh god. Anyway, for a guy who looks like an overweight tall boy or charger in case you're a Left 4 Dead 2 elitist, he can sure hit just as hard as them now that his MP buff makes him hit harder than most 5-star single target sabers. He does need RNG to go his way or be at low HP to pull that off, but the fact that this is a thing now should make you reconsider him as a bit more than just an oversized apple that keeps showing up in your gacha summons. What you're probably going to use him for though, if you're going to bother using him at all, is his skills, since he's got decent damage support for the team and his rarity makes him both easily accessible and cheap on the party cost in case that's an issue. Just don't ask him how he got that big ass arm. Gawain, 4-star Gorilla. Kanata's favorite servant, if she played FGO that is. The only problem is that Gawain might not find Kanata to be his kinda lady. He's basically the 4-star version of Fergus, but much more YOLO since the only defensive buff that he has is a 1-turn guts, but that's not a problem if you know how he works. Then again, most of you aren't named Honako, so you probably don't. His only problem used to be that his first skill has an environmental trigger, but now his buffed charisma can force it, letting you mash big red buttons with him harder than Mei players can mash that one funny dolphin move. Gilderay Saber, 3-star, flex? Except not really? Seriously, what the fuck are you supposed to do with a kit like that? Theoretically, he has a few cool things going for him. His third skill, if Lord, can give him infinite 40% buster buff uptime, along with a 100% attack buff for 2 turns at MP5. So with that, you'd think his MP is buster, except it's not. It doesn't even do any fucking damage, and he has a tactic skill, which means he can't even use it on himself. Ugh, fucking year 1 FGO servant design. God damn it, DW, I fucking swear to God. Jason, 1-star arts looper if you're retarded enough to grail his dumbass all the way up to 100 or something. He's the closest you're gonna get to a Konosuba collab with FGO, assuming Nexon doesn't take a fat steaming shit on that one Konosuba gacha game before then, kinda like how Netmarble shit all over the Korean server. That being said, he can be used as an expendable support, especially for any Argonaut servant, and can even clear a wave on his own if the enemies are weak enough, which is more than what I can say for fucking Sabers Saber Guild. Hokusai Saber, 4-star arts DPS. After 4 years, DW finally pulls their heads out of their asses and gives us a good welfare saber that we can give a shit about. And of course it'd be on Hokusai, because Japanese bias is also one hell of a drug. And that's okay though, we're all weebs here, so of course nobody minds. Also, her swimsuit is actually hot as fuck, but that's besides the point. She's designed to be a self-sufficient arts crit saber with a deck and kit that helps her not only generate and gather her own stars, but also rewards her for critting with more crit buffs. In this sense, she actually plays a lot like Saberlot, with less damage from her face cards, but better MP damage to more than make up for that. By the way, how many katanas does she have again? And in case this wasn't obvious already, Hokusai is Ina's favorite FGO servant. I mean, where else did she get the idea to make you all tacos? Lakshmibai, 4-star quick flex. The one Jean face that's actually historically accurate, so we actually can't give Takeuchi shit here for making another saber face. I mean, Jean face. Not that that'll stop some of you. All of her skills are support, with a gimmick that she needs to use her S3 that has a buff success buff first, since her other 2 skills have RNG effects. If you hate Imperial Privilege as much as I do, you better not forget to hit that S3. Eula's buffs are legitimately good, but they give your team a little bit of everything without much focus on one particular aspect, which is... it can be kind of bad sometimes. She can also Scotty loop, but she's not very good at it and needs plug suit support. Still, she's your only option for a quick saber if you don't believe in Zerkalot supremacy for whatever reason, until we get Castoria and Muramasa at least. Saberlot, 4-star arts DPS. Like Hokusai from earlier, Dilf is an arts crit saber as well. While you can turn any DPS servant in FGO into a crit servant with a little bit of effort, Saberlot has everything he needs to be one himself built into his kit already, to the point where not using him as such is kind of a bruh moment. Also, you have him and Gawain to thank for Ruler Toria being in a bunny girl outfit for Summer 4. Lanling Wang, or Gao Changgong, if you prefer his real name, 4-star art support. Hopefully I didn't butcher both of his names too badly. Chinese femboy's got a whole resume of good buffs that make him a solid alternative art support. Really the only thing that holds him back is the fact that he doesn't have triple arts cards like a normal caster. But with his MP, he can give his team a 3-turn 50% attack buff and a 3-turn 20% arts buff, which is pretty damn good for only being a 4-star. Maeve Saber, 4-star arts flex, maybe? Celtic Super Bitch is at her peak as a summer servant, but unfortunately her kit isn't. It has arts crit support potential, but Maeve can neither do that very well, nor take advantage of it herself very well, which is kind of like rolling for MP5 servants, but leaving them all at level 1 like most Facebook whales do. Just give Lonling a 2030 and he basically does Maeve's job and then some. Also, make sure Maeve doesn't abuse Petra too hard, unless you're a fucking freak and you're into that shit. Musashi, 5-star gorilla. She's walking proof that the Lightworks does in fact play favorites. I mean, did she really need that super effective mod against alter egos and moon cancers? She's also an ever-potent reminder that gender-bending historical figures will always make fucking bank, in case another Saber didn't teach you that already. You do need at least a few ridges on that smooth brain of yours to put data loss to optimal use, since her first skill is one of the most broken skills in the game, but needs good situational awareness to use properly. But most of the time that doesn't matter, since FGO isn't exactly a hard game if you support meta fuck it into oblivion with your double Merlins and double Tomoviches, which is probably what you're going to be doing most of the time anyway. Mordred, 5-star reloader. Just like her dad, she's become a reload meme with the new Tomovich system, and just like before, she's still not as good at it as she is, unless she's fighting her dad and clones of her dad. Even after 6 years, Mordred's still got daddy issues, in case you couldn't tell. Since DW killed her instinct, she's now technically a Buster Crit Saber, but why would you bother with her when Proto Arthur exists? Then again, some of y'all have a thing for booty jeans, so do what you need to. Nero, 4-star arts something? She's like an arts survival DPS? Arts tank, kind of? But, why the fuck would you need that at this stage of the game, even in NA? Speaking of DW playing favorites, actually, this bitch got 3 costumes when most anyone else has is like 1. And no, Shiki doesn't count, since who in their right fucking mind thinks that giving a girl just bunny ears is a whole costume on their own? Yeah, let's just give a servant nobody fucking uses 3 whole costumes, because clearly the Nero Sims didn't have enough to coom over. This definitely isn't my salt as a Tomo main talking, by the way. Nero Bride, 5-star arts flex. Now this right here is a Nero that I can simp for. Why didn't they give this one 3 costumes? With her third buff, Waifu Nero is an amazing alternative support even in an era where Castoria's and Tomovich's reign supreme, since it gives her a support niche against Sky attribute enemies, and there are plenty of those to go around, I'm sure. For you NA chads, you'll more than likely be getting plenty of mileage out of her S1 buff for these few upcoming lotteries until Castoria shows up. Okuta, 5-star quick DPS. If there were ever a genetic lottery for FGO servants, then COVID Simulator is one of the clear winners, ironically enough, because even as a year 1 servant with a year 1 kit, her base stats are so good that not even DW's obsession with lost data could justify not taking Okuta over Musashi sometimes, especially when Scotty was meta back in the day. She also won the genetic lottery in other ways too. Nowadays, I'm not so sure if people use Okuta that much anymore, with Castoria going around bonking people with her staff, but Okuta did get her first skill buffed, which makes it so that she always wants to put her MP as anchor in her brave chains with the buff active, which is what some idiots do anyway because they think that putting an MP card as last in your brave chain on its own increases the damage. Whether that buff alone is going to convince you to give up arts meta to go back to dogshit quick cards just to use Okuta again, though, is up to you. Rama, 4-star Buster DPS. Banana Boy is a single target saber with a super effective mod against demonic enemies, which makes him the literal hardest counter to bicorns, which was really nice 3 years ago, back when everyone was rushing horns for Jalter, but who the shit needs horns nowadays? The rest of his kit is okay. He does have a charisma, and his S1 gives him good crit damage for 1 turn, so he can be a burst crit DPS thanks to this. His MP got a buff, so now he's even better against demonic enemies, so if you really want to see Krillin run around throwing Destructo discs at them, Ranma 1/2 is your guy. Girl? Close enough. Saber Shiki, 5-star arts DPS. Remember when people used to say that she didn't do any damage? Yeah, those are the same people who say FGO is dying every year and spam Pog in their favorite VTuber's YouTube chat, probably Pecora's. Shiki is a rare case of an arts DPS having a party-wide debuff cleanse, which is really nice in a classic arts team since that's one thing Tama Caster can't do, and still pretty nice when Castoria shows up since 2 layers of debuff cleanses helps them deal with debuff spammers. Other than that, pop those buffs and go ham, and try not to think too hard about why she has those bunny ears. Siegfried, 4-star Drago Slayer. Unlike Alira, he won't tell you to drag on these nuts, since he'll just say sorry instead. Speaking of Alira, he can bully her, her sister, and any other dragon thanks to his power mod and super effective mod against them. But since that's literally all he can do, the most use anyone gets out of him nowadays is giving him his summer costume and making him do his best Billy Harrington impression on the beach. Zigguard, 5-star Drago Slayer. Zigguard is the guy Bryn told you not to worry about, and he also may or may not have a small little card game addiction. Just small, don't worry about it. Alira is also his favorite VTuber since that's probably the closest he'll get to having a blue eyes white dragon in another universe. It's either that or he grabs 3 Citanais and tries to take over the world. Kaiba is Siegfried but good because his anti-Drago effect is on a single target MP, which is preferable since it's great against dragon bosses, which also includes servants who also have the Drago tag. Really the only thing that holds him back is the fact that his mana burst is tied to its guts, which gives it a really long cooldown for whatever reason. DW, buff his mana burst now, match! Suzuka, 4-star Buster DPS. Not to be confused with Suzuya from Azure Lane, the fact that they're both schoolgirls and sword users is pure coincidence, I'm sure. She's theoretically a self-sufficient Buster crit saber who needs to manually generate her own stars using her first skill with her NP, but she still doesn't have a Starweight skill, and it's still easier to stick Merlin to your team, so only true men of culture like myself can appreciate Suzuka's tummy to its fullest potential. Setting Master, 4-star Arts DPS. Specifically, he's a burst Arts crit saber who can also gimp an enemy's attack with a 70% attack debuff for 1 turn and potentially refund himself with Arts crits. You just need to provide the stars he needs to do that. He also silently judges you for rolling for Tomovich when you already have Castoria, you dirty traitor. All hail Arts supremacy. Saber's done. Now for the archers. Altera Archer, 4-star Quick Flex. That's never not gonna make me sound like a fucking millennial. Basically, Altera, when she gets a fever during the holidays, in a universe where servants aren't supposed to get physically sick like humans do because I don't fucking know. Also, imagine a 4-star servant that's harder to get than their 5-star version, Omega lol, I guess. She's a solid damage support with a targetable 20% charge and 30% MP damage buff, both of which she can put on herself to use with her NP that can pierce Invul and generate a lot of stars for her to use the next turn with her Archer Starweight, and smack people with a goddamn candy cane. She's also part of a certain list of servants that you should probably keep away from Iris, and Zerko looks like he'll have fun playing rock, paper, scissors with Watame. Anne Archer, 4-star Buster DPS. Annual reminder that Anne is voiced by Kawasumi Ayako, and that Saber and her clones are not the only characters she voices. Not that anyone cares since no one uses this servant. Her gimmick, which she got from Mary since they're supposed to be a composite servant, is that her MP does more damage the less HP she has, and she has an infinite guts that puts her at 1 HP specifically for that purpose on a 5-turn cooldown. Unfortunately, she doesn't have any heals of her own, so most of the time she's just a one-hit wonder who blasts her MP for max damage once, and then dies to bring in someone else from her backline. Speaking of someone else who also does that, Arash, 1-star farmer, better known as Stella. Another annual reminder that the Lightworks gave a Middle Eastern guy an MP that makes him blow people up and kill himself with it. And they really looked at that and thought to themselves, yeah, that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Admittedly, no one cares since Stella is a goddamn nuke, no pun intended, and if you've ever wondered why, he has single target MP multipliers on his AoE MP. With a ghetto scope and his 30% charge, he's the definition of a budget nuke in this game, and one of the only ways for free-to-plays to experience what it's like having a super scope that they'll never have outside of their support lists. Arjuna, 5-star, he has a really high attack stat, which is wasted on his edgy ass because DW thought that making caster decks with a Buster NP was a good idea. Yeah, it's not. He does have really good MP damage, so you can use him as like a one-turn nuke, but imagine using one-turn nukes even when NA is halfway into Scotty meta, and don't even think about trying his ass with reload means. The one thing that he's got going for him is his challenge quest potential, since he has a whopping 5-turn debuff immunity, but even then his problem is the fact that he has an AoE MP, and he has no party utility of his own. His MP is nice to look at though, and I'm sure his Australian sister would like it too. Squirtle, 5-star Arts DPS. The game's first truly broken Arts DPS because being able to loop your own MP by yourself in an era before Castoria or even Scotty is pretty damn good. And that's it. Asagami Fujino, 4-star Bridge Bender. Shinano has a defense pierce and an evade pierce with a single target MP, which gives her great utility as a late game archer. This is even better now that she's got an MP buff that now gives her a super effective mod against big Chungus enemies, so now she and Proto Arthur can go on a bloody honeymoon together, murdering thick boys. Speaking of buffs, honestly the bigger one that she got was a second fucking raid up, so that people who dragged their balls through the 4-star gotcha hell during KNK rerun and anyone else who wasn't around back then could finally have another chance to roll her again in a gotcha not called GSSR. Astra Talman, 4-star. The Angry Man. With the power of your typical edgy 16-year-old high school weeaboo, Ash stopped abusing Pokemon for a living and now throws around Hot Wheels cars that he played with as a kid as a way to relieve his angst. We sure his name isn't Abigail? Oh wait, it can't be, we already have Abigail at home. True to his nature though, Ash has skills that power him up the more he attacks within a certain window, and he has the same gimmick that Anne does of doing more damage with his MP the less health he's got, but he does have a Lancer deck, which is definitely odd for archers, and takes some getting used to, but once you got it, it's no big deal. Also, another one of Sana's relatives from another universe, though I think Crony might be more interested in him. Nienta, 4-star Quick Looper. Before she became a Scotty meme, her problem was that she was designed as a crit archer but had subpar attack stats and a 2A 2Q deck, which isn't ideal if you're trying to deal damage, so she was used more as a burst star gen since her MP was really good at doing that at least. Well, now that Scotty's here, she is a perfect Scotty meme, so she's your instant go-to for farming Saber nodes in events or free quests. Nienta would also like to know Fauna's location so that she can get in on some of those sweet gapples. Bailey Harrington, 3-star quick DPS. Specifically, he's a crit archer who can give himself over 150% crit damage for one turn. And that's it. Unfortunately, his crit damage is the only thing he has going for him. If he doesn't crit, then he's gonna hit like a potato since he has a shitty attack rating, and he's a 3-star, and he has no other damage buff of his own. He can't even generate his own stars properly despite being a quick servant either because his hit counts are trash, and his skills don't produce any. Billy's unfortunately another good example of a one-pump chump, which I'm sure Aniki wasn't, so DW did him kinda dirty here. Chiron, 4-star Arts Flex. He tried applying to be an Uma Musume, but got rejected because he has a penis, and you can't have that in that game, otherwise they send Ichiban to cap your bitch ass. Here in FGO though, he's both a potent damage support and a great crit support to the point where esports Chirons are a thing, since double Chiron can give one servant both a 100% crit damage buff and a 60% projection buff, both for 3 turns, and with 30 stars to work with, though Chiron being an archer kinda fucks with that, admittedly. And as if that weren't enough, he also has the world's deadliest finger bang that removes most kinds of protection that your servants might have. No wonder people make so much hentai about horsecocks. Chloe, 4-star jailbait. Essentially a free budget Squirtle since they both share the same role as an arts DPS, though Chloe plays more like a burst DPS while Squirtle is more consistent when she gets going. She's also a rare case of an arts star gen since her battery gives her a star gen buff that turns even her arts cards into star generators because they all have 6 hits on them, so she can brave chain and follow up with crits right after. Just make sure not to grail her because then that obviously means you're a lolicon, right? David, 3-star support. Spoiler alert, he's the dad of the guy who's responsible for making you go through all those singularities back in part 1. He also calls every girl he runs into Abishag and has his flirt level at 0, so you can imagine how well that goes. For all the dumb shit that he does though, in-game he's actually a solid budget support with a charisma and party evade. Even though he's another archer with a mismatched deck, in his case it actually works out because his face cards help the rest of his team charge their MPs, which fits well with the rest of his support roles, so he's not as big of a dumbass as he lets off. Redman, 4-star mom. Hey, if Mordred insists on having a female dad, then why can't we have a male mom? The quintessential example of an archer with a mismatched deck, DW finally fixed this issue for him, and only him, for whatever reason, by giving him the ability to toggle his MP type, which resulted in some hilarious refund memes for him. Other than that, he's meant to be a crit archer, but then again, like Niantic before him, it kinda sucks being a crit servant with only one buster face card, and not even an MP toggle buff can fix that. Then again, it's 2021, who the fuck even needs crits anymore when you got bitches like Castoria and Tomovich running around? Emiya Alter, 4-star arts DPS. Other than being a walking example of why you should never go off the deep end, just like how Chloe is comparable to Squirtle as an arts DPS, Demia can be seen as the same way, with different nuances that set them apart and make them play a little differently. MJ also boasts one of the highest, if not still the highest single target archer damage in the game thanks to his multiple self buffs and his MP buff. Combine this with his MP recharge reduction effect, and you have a surprisingly potent arts DPS that's still worth considering over other single target arts archers. Little did you know, he also practices moonwalking when he thinks you're not looking. Uriel, 3-star destroyer of men. She's the hard counter to the Gawain boss fights in Camelot, and the reason why Gawain still gets nightmares about her every now and then, even 3 years later. This is because Yuri's MP not only does extra damage to dudes, but it also charms them, and with the separate charm skill, she can easily charm lock any male enemy that she's up against by herself for a little bit. She's the game's prime example of a servant who has a very specific niche that just happens to be really strong, since quite a few key fights throughout FGO's main story are often against male Sabers or Berserkers. So strong, in fact, that Lost Belt 2 specifically featured male Saber boss fights that had mental debuff immunity, just so that people wouldn't just Yuri fuck them all to death. Gilgamesh, 5-star arrogant fuckboy. Kinda like Okuta, Gil is a year 1 servant with a year 1 kit that's still decently relevant even in current year just because of his Enuma Elish gimmick, and he is a potential reloader, though his basic ass bitch skill set is admittedly starting to show its age. Not that it really matters since he got a second animation update that no one asked for, so that's basically a good enough buff for him. Helena Archer, or a 4-star arts DPS, I guess? What the fuck else would she do? She unfortunately doesn't have the party projection buff that her caster form has, which sucks since it was basically half the reason why she was such a good support caster. For what it's worth, she does have an AoE MP with a party 20% charge, so she can be used for certain farming setups, but then again, why bother when refund and reload memes exist? Ishtar, 5-star useless goddess. If you're considering trying out that one Konosuba gacha game, just remember that not only is it being published by Nexon, but FGO already has its own Aqua at home. You might also be surprised to find that Ishtar is actually not useless in this game. She's a god tier farming archer, pun intended, ever since her debut, and has stayed relevant throughout the game with a nice MP buff, and most recently, her new role as a Tomovich reloader. She's also the resident S-Tini of FGO with how she tells you to kiss her feet, which some of you are into, I'm sure. James Moriarty, 5-star buster DPS. He's yet another example of an archer with a mismatched deck that nobody likes. How many times do we need to teach you this lesson, old man? But, thanks to all the buffs that he's gotten so far in JP, Evil Boomer now has a kit that is very convenient to use, at least compared to how it used to be. His S1 now gives him 20 stars, which he can use to activate his S2 battery, which he can then use to give his allies a double charisma, just not himself still, unfortunately. Grandpa was also pissed that Sherlock has both invul and defense pierce in his own kit, so DW gave his first skill the same thing for 1 turn, which is really nice to go with his 50% battery that enables him to use 50% starting charge CEs on his own, or Black Rail memes with another 50% charger. And as if that weren't enough, he can also be a burst crit archer if he happens to have everything he needs. Who the hell gave him a rocket launcher anyway? Jarcher, 5-star arts looper. Just like Ishtar, she's used almost exclusively as a farmer even before Castoria, and with her, she's now the Spishtar of archer loopers. Y'all NA players better have used her to farm Guildfest 2, assuming she hasn't gone batshit insane again, which is a common side effect of being a magical girl, it seems. Kid Gil, 3-star buster DPS. He's one of FGO's perfect examples of that one "fuck, go back" meme, and he'd probably agree too. In the olden days, before Tomovich reloading, he was a nice budget wave clear with his AoE MP, with the same rank of charisma as his SSR self to help his teammates wave clear better too. But nowadays, he's just kinda collecting dust in Chaldea along with the rest of your silver and bronze servants not named Changong, ever since Scotty, then Castoria, and now Tomovich came along. Napoleon, 5-star reloader. The biggest Giga Chad along with Karna for the first 4 Lost Belts, Napoleon Dynamite is still down to help Pedro run for class president in another universe. He also doesn't appreciate your white flag surrender jokes, even if he's not actually French himself. Of note, he does extra damage against divine enemies, which is apparently all because he shot off the Sphinx's nose, so now all of a sudden he gets a super effective mod against divine targets just for that, because Nasuverse logic? Whatever the case, keep this in mind on the off chance that you run into enemy divine Sabers or Berserkers. Nikola Tesla, 5-star reloader. He saw Rama doing his Destructo Disc move one day and decided he could do better, which makes a lot of sense given his whole stealing lightning from the gods thing. Just don't introduce him to any German youth clubs, they might get the wrong idea about his pose. Other than beating the shit out of Edison, he's mainly useful nowadays as a reloader thanks to his 50% battery, though he may or may not be too happy about Elon Musk using his name to sell electric cars. Oda Nobunaga, 4-star buster DPS. She's best friends with Mami because her attacks and Noble Phantasm are basically just musket. And if that don't work, use more musket. Her gimmick is doing a shit ton of damage against anyone who has either riding, divine, or preferably both, and God help you if Nobu also gets class advantage on top of that. She can also easily be a crit archer if you're not begging her to cosplay as another long black-haired katana pyro girl, also voiced by Kugimiya Rie. Osaka Behemoth Archer, 4-star something. Fuck these mismatched decks, god. She's meant to be used as a setup archer who clears wave 1 to buff the rest of her team with a charisma and buster buff. The force taunt on her charisma seems weird at first until you realize that you don't need to deal with it if you just kill everyone on that wave. Since she's not a reloader though, she'll probably just spend all her time playing Apex since she's addicted to it like Ollie is. Orion, 5-star dick kicker because Artemis is the one doing that since Orion is just a goddamn teddy bear. Also, annual reminder that Artemis is voiced by Sawashiro Miyuki, who also voices all these characters, and somehow her Artemis voice sounds nothing like the most of them. I could sum up Artemis as a 5-star Uriel and just stop there, but for what it's worth, she's not only a Uriel with better stats, but also not as one-dimensional as her, though she can't charm lock, and you'll still treat her like a 5-star Uriel most of the time anyway. For most people, though, she's more or less the same as Arjuna in that she only exists to piss you off in your gacha rolls. Paris, 2-star quick DPS, kind of, since just like Niente, he has a 2Q2A deck, which isn't the kind of deck you want as a DPS. Not that this matters, since he's only a 2-star, and imagine using a bronze servant not named Stella, Oppression, or The Gong as a main DPS. He does have a potentially strong gimmick of removing buffs from an enemy, which then gives him an automatic super effective mod against them on an MP that pierces Invul, but the bigger worry he should have is whether or not Watame is going to try to adopt him as a younger brother. Robin Hood, 3-star arts DPS. He also has a 2Q2A deck with a gimmick of his own that lets him do extra damage with his MP against poisoned enemies, but in Robin's case, he doesn't need to worry about having a shitty deck since his MP's gimmick is generally easier to set up and has higher than average super effective mod scaling that lets him put up some dumb numbers for a 3-star. Assuming, of course, he's not more worried about losing more money to a bunch of nerds on Reddit. Tota, 3-star Demon Slayer. He's Tanjiro's long-lost brother who also has water-breathing techniques and a power mod against demonic enemies that lets him farm them quite easily for a 3-star by smacking him in the face with giant-ass rice bags that you get from your local Marukai. Tomoe Gozen, 4-star. With the power of Mountain Dew, Doritos, air horns, and Snoop Dogg, Tomoe yeets enemies with her single-target MP and 360 no-scopes them in mid-air, hit markers not included despite the fact that she plays Apex, not Call of Duty. She can also double as a buster crit archer thanks to her Starway buff, and she's got demonic charisma and a party stargen skill for some party support of her own, which is almost as good as having 4 IMs all at once. Tristan, 4-star Despacito. He's like the inverse of David. They're both archers with the same party evade skill, but while David directly buffs or supports the the team, Tristan debuffs enemies instead. Well, that's how it used to be, because now with his buffs, Tristan's party evade skill now removes all party debuffs, including that one annoying MP seal that he gives himself for using his own battery, and gives him a 3-turn 30% quick buff on top of that so that he can do damage on top of having a buff removal for one enemy with an NP that pierces defense. Basically a more challenge quest oriented quick archer, which isn't bad for someone who doesn't bother opening his eyes for most things unless it's to look at Booba. This is so sad. Alexa, play Unravel. William Tell, 3-star arts DPS. will.i.am is a natural arts crit archer thanks to his 30-star bomb and starweight skill that gives him access to some fast crit damage with 2 button presses. He also has a similar gimmick to Paris, but instead of removing an enemy's buffs to do big damage to them, he specifically smacks the shit out of you if you have any kind of evade up, well, except for the ones that can't be removed apparently. He also listens to Bad Apple covers, specifically Enhato's remix. Archer's done, Lancer's up next.
I just can't beat it. You're something special, but damn, it's stressful.
Lartoria, 5-star reloader. Just like how Ishtar is the queen of farming archers, Lartoria is also the queen of farming lancers, even during a time before Tomovich, as hard as that is to imagine. If you don't believe me, just look at all the other FGO YouTubers back then who made videos about her when she got added saying that she's trash because none of them knew what farming in FGO was until Scotty showed up to make farming easy for them. Apparently she's also spent some time recently getting called an idiot sandwich by Lolly Ramsey because Lartoria now also has Benny's power mod against chaotic or evil enemies, preferably both of course. This gives her premium status as a Tomovich reloader against nodes that have servants who are either or both of those alignments, and of course even better with class advantage. Just make sure she doesn't let Mordred get tossed off a cliff. Long live the king. Lalter, 4-star Buster DPS. She's the southern hemisphere to Lartoria's northern hemisphere, which should remind you exactly why DW made both of them Buster Lancers in the first place. She also hangs out with Prince Heinrich from Azure Lane and PTRD from Girls Frontline as part of the Underboob Club in her free time. Unlike Lartoria though, she's not a reloader but rather a Buster crit meme with the skill that gives her everything she needs to become one for a turn. The only real problem she has is the fact that she and Salter are still in the Charisma E Club. How the fuck did Gawain get his buff before them? Brad, 5-star Scotty meme, I guess, though why bother with her when you already have both the Valkyries or Parvati? Other than posting Let's Play videos on her YouTube channel, Zuikaku is learning how to do a flying peach from Armika and enjoys exhibition play with all the public ass flashing she does every time she NPs. Rin, 5-star Buster Flex. Lusamine decided to stop being a Pokemon trainer or something and become a servant, but in the process became a Yandere, which may or may not be an improvement overall. She did keep her hairstyle though. She has the ability to turn anyone into a crit meme, including herself, and her MP grants the party a strong star gen buff for 3 turns that helps them generate stars first before Bryn uses her 3rd skill. Her 2nd skill buff should have been a targetable 30% charge instead of a self-charge only though, to really cement her role as a damage support. Still, she does have her own unique super effective mod that literally weaponizes her Yandere tendencies, so try not to get on her good side before she stuffs your body into a Pokeball and keeps you there forever. Ku, 3-star Anchor. One of the only true examples of an anchor in FGO, Kenny's job is to hold down the backline and just outlast his opponents, and he does this by popping PFA as soon as he enters the field, popping Guts when he's close to dying, and popping Disengage whenever he's got debuffs to deal with. If only he could do this in South Park too. For these same reasons, he's also a natural solo servant, one of the most notorious ones in fact, with his whole reputation of never fucking dying, which might confuse people who've only watched the Fate animes and never played FGO before. And with his S1 buff that now gives him extra attack the lower his HP is, he's even more of a solo servant now than ever before. Just remember that while he's certainly a survival god, he's not going to be killing anything all that quickly except for maybe archers, so the further you progress in the game, the less you'll find yourself using him on average. But in the beginning of the game, when you're just first starting out, you probably do have a Ku to fall back on, and that's perfectly fine for most people. Ku Proto, 3-star Hunter. He has a strong power mod against wild beast enemies, so if you're ever in need of talons, see if you can find him Yarnum. He's not as good as Vanilla Ku as a dedicated anchor since he doesn't have a Guts, but since he still has a PFA, he'll do in a pinch. Diarmid, 3-star Depression. Everything about this dude is just Sag. His lore, his kit, his Saber version, and the fact that DW buffed all the Kus, even fucking Ku Caster, and they don't give a rat's ass still about this guy. He'll get along very well with Mr. Harold, probably. Elizabeth Bathory, 4-star support. Almost everyone hates her because she sounds annoying and was FGO's Halloween welfare servant for 3 years straight, so they bullied the shit out of her harder than Freakazoid bullied Simple. And we should have known that was going to happen to Alouette too. All the bullying in the world doesn't stop her from being one of the better damage buffers in the game though, specifically for female allies, and given that most people play FGO for their waifus, this should be relevant to most of you. Or at least it would be if you weren't already suffering from the past 3 years worth of refund and now reload brain rot. Enkidu, 5-star, what the fuck? Outside of being a guest character in Uniel, Clayboy is an anti-divine and anti-threat to humanity single target lancer. He's also like Ku in the sense that he's also an excellent solo lancer, except unlike Ku, he actually does damage because SSR stats are also one hell of a drug. He's also the Aniki to Gil's Van Darkhold. Ereshkigal, 5-star cutie. Other than being cute though, she's a flex lancer with thighs thicker than Lartoria's tits, or at least that's what their stats would lead you to believe if you compare them. Her original role was as a farming lancer, though she was generally regarded as a little bit worse than Lartoria since she had lower attack, and was a little bit more difficult to use since her mana burst is tied to her battery, though one trick that she did have to herself was the ability to give another teammate a double charisma buff if she clears the first 2 waves on her own with the help of Super Scope, which most of you wouldn't know about. Now she's not only a reloader, but DW was nice enough to give her a much needed MP buff to make up for her potato damage from before, and as if that weren't enough, she also now has super effective damage against Earth attribute enemies. And if that still isn't good enough for you, you can now even take your Erish to 120 to really make sure no one ever calls her a potato ever again. Theon McCumhale, 4-star performance artist, and yes, I did just call him Cumhale, whether that's right or wrong. As much as everyone makes fun of him for his name and the fact that he has to suck his own thumb to use his power, he was for quite a long time the only potential arts looper in the game until Lambda showed up, and even then, if you're an NA player who didn't get Lambda, he's gonna stay your only option until either Lambda comes back on raid up or you somehow manage to roll Virtra in another year. Garrett, 2-star Buster tank, I think. The most ordinary looking knight from the round table to the point where she looks like she belongs in the Ghosts and Goblins remaster more than FGO. She's a taunt lancer in a game where Leonidas and George both exist, so you can imagine how well that shit works out. She does at least offer a single target MP that gets stronger the more times she's hit, and pierces invul, which is pretty cool on a bronze servant until you realize Vlad Extra does all the same things that she does. Hector, 3-star, I don't know, that doesn't matter. Eric Bana is mostly used as a wave clear if he's used at all. He got a buff recently that made his tactics into a 3-turn party MP damage buff, which is nice, but that still isn't enough to make him relevant in an age where Buster reloading is now the thing to do. And Hector doesn't have a charge skill, so he's shit out of luck. He and Paris are brothers, by the way. Hozoin Inshun, 3-star quick DPS. Like Ku, Saitama is also a solo lancer, but unlike Ku, he actually does damage. Moon's overall game plan is to use his quick cards to build up crit stars and MP gauge, use his MP to make his crit stronger, and keep using his quick cards that do more crit damage and produce more stars to rinse and repeat. Lucario can do this even in a team where he's properly supported, but he really shines when he's on his own, though once he is solo, he basically has a time limit set on him to get as much damage done as possible before he eventually fizzles out due to a lack of hard defense effects other than the single hit evade on his NP. Ibaraki Lancer, 4-star Buster DPS. Summer Banana is a Buster crit meme with a 30-star bomb as her MP's overcharge, so she's another one of those flowchart servants who use their MPs, then prage for good face card RNG to crit everything the next turn the same way flowchart Mei players mash the damn dolphin. Jaguar Man, 3-star Buster DPS. It's a really good thing FGO isn't as mainstream as Genshin actually. Twitter would piss themselves when they find out that Jaguar Man is a woman in this game. Palm Top Tiger can be a Buster crit meme, but her Starway buff only activates if she's on forest battlefield stages, so she's better at being Ketsu's punching bag and being Ryuji's boyfriend. Jailter, 4-star Buster wave clear, I guess. There's nothing else she can do. Her entire existence can be summed up with the power of God and anime meme, which probably explains why she's able to throw miniature versions of Amakusa's NP at people. She was for a very long time the only welfare lancer we had for NA until we got Kenshin earlier this year, so now no one cares about Jailter anymore. Karna, 5-star Giga Chad. Technically his kit isn't anything that special, especially with all the shit new servants are getting these days, but he does have a super effective mod against divine enemies, which makes him feel like he's doing single target damage when his MP is AoE. His latest buff was the Super Karna costume he got for Lost Belt 4, which is honestly the best buff that he can get because it only serves to make him an even bigger Giga Chad. Kyo Lancer, 4-star Stalker. If you've grailed her or the other Kyo or any other member of Chaldea's Stalker Club, I suggest getting psychological help because you've been Stockholm Syndromed harder than Lakari's addicted to E7. True to her nature, Kyo Lancer wants to target one enemy in particular and torture them until they die. And remember that she and Skaha Lancer both share 6-hit Buster cards that actually generate more MP charge than their quick cards do because DW still didn't understand hit count mechanics for a full year into the game. Leonidas, 2-star Buster support, as strange as that is. True to real life, Master Chief's gameplay revolves around protecting his team by taunting enemies to attack him with 2 separate taunts. His most recent buff changed his guts into a stackable guts and gave him the ability to give his team a charisma every time he uses a guts, so not only does he keep your waifus safe, but now he gives your team a combination of a Buster buff, crit stars, and a charisma buff for every guts he uses. Does this matter when Tomovich exists? Probably not, but Sparta! Li Shuan Lancer, 4-star Arts DPS. Specifically, he's an Arts crit meme, but his biggest problem is the fact that all of his skill effects only last for 1 turn, making him one of the biggest one-pump chumps in the game. With his buffs, though, he becomes less of a one-hitter quitter, but then again, we have Kenshin now, so. Medusa Lily, 4-star Sassy Lost Child. Anna's best feature is her ability to steal headpaths from you at any given time if you don't count her other ability to help you, Foe, and Morgan bully the shit out of Merlin. Also, try not to confuse her with the Russian Anna. Raiko Lancer, 4-star Buster Flex. When she's not flexing her tits that seem to have their own gravitational forces, she's a great alternative Buster support thanks to her charisma and targetable Buster buff that conveniently enough also comes with a debuff Clear that made her a very useful buffer for certain events like the Case Files raids in case you got bad RNG and got that one Buster debuff at the start. She can also turn herself into a Buster crit meme for 1 turn by smacking you in the face with her boobas, and again, she's one of those flowchart servants who use their MPs to make stars and then crits the shit out of bitches the next turn type of thing. Benkei, 2-star who? Summermelt, 4-star Arts Looper. Happy Feet is the second Arts Lancer meme after Fion and is also the better one since she has better buffs, one of which is an Arts buff whose duration is longer than its cooldown at max level, so Prinny is able to stack that shit for a 40% Arts buff for 1 turn on top of having an infinite Arts buff uptime. She can also be a crit lancer since her MP also produces stars, but she's better off as a looper. If Petra's still looking to be adopted out of Obsidia, her best chance is probably with Lambda, all things considered. Nagao Kagatora, 4-star Arts DPS. Kenshin is another Arts crit lancer because clearly we didn't have enough of those in the game yet. While she doesn't do anything out of the ordinary, her high attack stat and the fact that she's welfare so you can have her MP5 make her a solid go-to for any single target Arts lancer needs you might have. And remember kids, smiling all the time is not a personality trait. Nutcha, 4-star Buster DPS. This is what Miyako will look like in about 10 years, by the way. Nukehead is a generic Buster DPS Lancer. You can turn her into a Buster crit meme if you want to spice things up, but she still can't reload with Tomovich, so what the fuck ever. Parvati, 4-star Scotty meme. She and the Valks share the same role as a Lancer Scotty Looper. Parvati offers better burst damage on third waves, while Valks have more consistent damage throughout a node, assuming you have both of them and they're at the same MP level. If not, then just use whoever you have or whoever has the higher MP level. Chen Liangyu, 4-star Arts DPS. Chun-Li's an Arts version of Baldi from earlier. Her MP is also an installed type that gives her hella buffs, but rather than fizzle out and die like he does, she gets progressively stronger and stronger over time with all the debuffs she puts on her targets. The trade-off is that ideally you want to use her in an Arts team that can also support her crits, unlike Baldi who likes going solo since she'll have a hard time producing stars on her own. Romulus, 3-star Praise the Sun. Solaire is an old-school Wave 1 Wave Clear Lancer with a targetable Buster buff and a 10% attack buff for the team from his MP's Overcharge, but most of you know him more either as that one funny Dark Souls dude with his arms out up in the air, or as his 5-star Ultra Chad version. Skaha, 5-star Quick DPS, the original quick support servant along with Nyanta back in the day for those of you too zoomer to remember or to have played the game back then. She's the game's best divine or undead killer thanks to her power mod and her buffed single target MP, but she has a same main issue as Li Shuan from before, where all of her skill effects are for 1 turn, so she's best used as a burst lancer. You can try using her as a crit lancer thanks to her S1, but you'll have to deal with the RNG on it unless her recent S2 buff makes it guaranteed. The buff you care more about though is her bunny girl costume, because giving her actual meaningful buffs is clearly unnecessary when Castoria meta exists. Tama Lancer, 5-star Dick Kicker. Space Gin Simulator's main job is to kick guys in the nuts. Don't think too hard about how she makes them explode afterwards. She used to have a problem with her S3 that stuns her after using it, but now she can mostly mitigate it on her own with the right command codes whenever she's not going full Felicia on people. The Volks, 4-star Scotty meme, which is really fitting given their relationship. The other Scotty Looper in the Lancer class, they're one of the best reasons to use the Ascension Stage randomizer feature that NA got recently. Also, Ortlin is best Volk, change my mind. Sag Vlad, 4-star Buster Flex, kinda. He's the reason why I said Gareth is a little redundant gameplay wise, because he also has a 1-turn taunt of his own, and a single target MP that also pierces Invul. He also gets a super effective mod against evil enemies, which gives him his role as a situational DPS. While admittedly Gareth is free and Vlad is, well, gotcha, let's be real here, you've all gotten a couple of Vlad spooks if you've been playing this damn game for long enough, especially if you've ever rolled for a 5-star Lancer on Raid Up. That's it for the Lancers. Next, we got the Riders.
絵文字ばかりでうなずき合おうよ上昇中の今日が今行動を止めるな
Achilles, 5-star Scotty Looper. For the couple of months that Achilles was in the game before Scotty, Brad Pitt was a crit rider who could also be used as a setup farmer with his 30% battery. With Scotty, though, he became a Scotty meme, naturally, and now that Scotty's job got outsourced to Castoria, he's now just a meme. He's also now a Pokemon trainer, or a Digimon trainer, or something. Alexander, 3-star support-ish. Rider supports always have an asterisk next to them since Riders have the highest star weight in the game as a class, so they'll always be able to crit the most easily out of all the classes. In Alex's case, kind of like Caesar, he also has 2 team buffs, a quick buff and a charisma, so he made for a good budget quick support back in the day. Probably the most mind-blowing thing about him though is that he's voiced by Sakamoto Maya, which personally blows my mind as hard as the fact that Asakawa Yu voices all the snacks in the game too. Malter, 5-star quick DPS. Tomovich may have popularized the whole skill cooldown reduction abuse thing that you have to do for reload memes now, but Malter was the one who made it a thing first by being able to pop her S3 twice by using it along with her S2 for the skill cooldown, so she was doing it before it was cool. I guess it's no coincidence that Malter's skill cooldown abuse gimmick was also called reloading too. Santa Alter, 4-star wave clear. She's literally just Salter in a Santa costume while binging KFC buckets. You can tell because her MP scaling is the same as Salter's. For this reason though, she's actually a great welfare wave clear since she's stronger than your average 4-star AoE servant. Not that this matters since there's almost no chance in hell you're ever seeing her again if you don't have her already. Astolfo, 4-star, who fucking cares. This is the guy who's responsible for all sorts of memes that have been going around the internet lately, like that one monster can meme on Twitter, and the servant responsible for making Giga burn $400 like a fucking idiot because either he didn't understand what raid up meant, or because he thought it was for pussies. Not that it matters since he made back that amount with a video he made out of it and then some. And yes, I said guy, did I stutter? As for how he is as a servant in this game, he's really weird and not in a good way. The only thing he could do back then was double MP with a limit broken scope, though as long as he was hitting 3 enemies, he could actually do this without you having to lower his battery thanks to his minimum refund, which was pretty cool, I guess. But nobody gave a shit about it back then, and certainly no one gives a shit about it now. Bartholomew, 1-star quick flex, probably. He's a weird example of a crit rider support that actually could work decently well, since he has a skill that removes his own star weight to help his teammates gather stars, and he directly produces some stars too. He also has Voyager on top of that, which is always a nice damage support skill. And for what it's worth, he does have a rather unique super effective mod against other bronze enemies, so if you're still stuck in 2017 doing setup teams for farming like a scrub, he can be quite the wave 1 or wave 2 clear if you need to deal with bronze enemies before the 3rd wave. Also, keep his horny ass away from Mash, Fran, Kotaro, Anastasia, Alira, anyone else whose hair covers one eye since that's his fucking fetish apparently, otherwise he won't stop cooming over them. Boudica, 3-star art support. Her biggest problem by far is the fact that she exists in a game where Tama Caster and now Castoria both exist. This isn't just Scotty levels of relevancy either, because at the very least Scotty had 2 whole years to herself to spend as the game's favorite support caster. Tama Caster came out with the game's very first Halloween event, so Boudica literally only had about 2 or 3 months to be at all relevant before she got dropped like how Tectone dropped Arknights for Genshin Impact. The worst part about it is that she's gotten buffed 3 whole times, and none of them were enough to convince people to suddenly start using her. The most she can be is as an alternative support for Romulus queerness, I guess, because of the whole anti-Roman thing, but now Tomovich double jeopardied her in what might be the game's most cruel twist of irony from a gameplay standpoint. Maybe I'm just exaggerating all this. After all, Boudica is the game's most popular servant who's used way more outside the game than in it. Though I guess you would need a metric fuckton of copium to really believe in that. Carmilla Ryder, 4-star quick support-ish. No one coomed harder than Fue and Plushie Mistress back when she was announced 2 years ago. She provides 2 forms of defense debuffs, one normal and one specifically for crits for some reason, and a delayed 25% team charge that the Curry boys might be able to appreciate at least, but you should make sure she takes a few driving tests first with the way she runs people over in her NP. If nothing else, she'll get along very well with St. Louis or Majorline since they're both ladies with a taste in fancy cars. Columbus, 3-star wave clear. He's a good setup writer, but that's about it. Besides, none of you gave a fuck about him before, and y'all certainly don't give a fuck about him now. Blackbeard, 2-star weeb. In-game, he's a budget wave clear, but he spends most of his time in the story being treated like the cringy weeb that he is. He does have some real nice drip now, though, so maybe he can show up in the new Melty Blood as a guest character or something. Drake, 5-star reloader. She was part of the OG 5-star farmers market with Lartoria and Ishtar since they all had 50% batteries and were all busters. And just like them, Tomovich brought her back into relevance too with her reload memes. No wonder she made a song about suffering from success. St. George, 2-star tank support. The game's most useful taunt support since he has a 3-turn taunt right out the gate, making him the most ubiquitous level 1 taunt wall, and the rest of his kit focuses almost entirely on his taunt roll so that he can protect your waifus and husbandos as best he can. It should be telling that DW hasn't felt the need to buff him at all, and for once, it's actually understandable why they wouldn't. King George is also best friends with Siegfried and Sigurd in case you're a little too obsessed with your overused thou art a dragon memes, and he sometimes gets tired of just being a taunt wall all the time too, and becomes a single target arts DPS in his free time. Iskander, 5-star flex, the time skip version of Alexander whom you're more familiar with anyway thanks to Fate Zero, and the guy Waver simps for. Also, the source for all your Bada FGO needs along with Napoleon. He is the definition of Unga Bunga in FGO since everything he does is related to doing more damage, so he and Leo from Strive can have a nice chat about the philosophy of Unga Bunga. Unfortunately, he's not as useful as someone like Drake since she has a 50% battery and he doesn't, and all the more so now that Iskander can't reload like Drake can. Ryder Ishtar, 4-star Scotty meme, sorta. She's not the best at it, but she can pull it off if you plug another buffer in. Even without Scotty memes, she's actually quite the strong wave clear thanks to her S1, her MP overcharge, and the fact that she's welfare, so you should have her MP5, and if you don't, sucks a suck, loser. She's also another potential esports servant since her first skill is really stacked for some reason, well, more so than she herself is anyway. Ivan, 5-star buster DPS. This is what Manny from Ice Age would look like in an alternate universe, and he'll still hate your dumbass Soviet Russia memes. He's one of the rare servants in the game who, despite having a buster deck, can run an art support thanks to his high base attack rating, his class advantage against casters, and his MP generation buff if you don't mind running some off-meta stuff. I mean, the fact that you're even using Ivan is off-meta in the first place, so you might as well try it out. Da Vinci Rider, 5-star arts meme, or Lolly Vinci if you don't mind going to jail. The more relevant Da Vinci, because somehow running people over with a vehicle is stronger than dropping a literal nuke on them like Da Vinci Caster does. She's solid proof that DW knew what they were going to do the next year after her release, though that does make me sound like I've got a tinfoil hat on. You should at least also strongly consider sending her with Carmilla Ryder to go take some driving tests together before they both get their licenses revoked. Marie, 4-star homie, straight out of Paris. Surprisingly, she's actually a Scotty meme thanks to her Ryder advantage against casters, and her 2 buffs to her S1 and MP solidify her meme status as if she weren't memed enough here in NA for saying "mo homies." Martha, 4-star support. She's a shadow member of the Chaldea Dragon Bullies Club with Siegfried, Sigurd, and George, even if she doesn't have a super effective mod of her own against them. As much as she bullies dragons herself though, the combination of her low attack rating and mismatched deck makes Martha a less than ideal DPS rider, but she does have very strong utility with her party debuff clear and both a buff removal and defense debuff for one enemy, making her a potent plug suit support candidate for challenge quests or late game fights. She's also the reason why Batman and Superman stopped bitching at each other in that one movie of theirs. Mary Reed, 4-star quick DPS. Anne's original since Mary came out first before her partner. She's the original 1 HP meme in FGO, with her MP doing more damage the lower her HP is, though it took God knows how many years for Mary to get a buff that lets her properly take advantage of that in the first place, but whatever, she has it now. On top of that, Mary's meant to be a burst crit rider because the idea is that she uses her quick brave chain to make a lot of stars, then collect those stars to do a ton of crit damage. Except the only problem is that she only has 2-hit quick cards because she's a year 1 servant, and back then, like I mentioned earlier, DAW didn't know what the fuck they were doing with their hit counts in their own game. She might be better at generating stars now with her S1 buff, but now her biggest problem is being one of those servants everyone forgets about. Rider Maeve, 5-star Buster Flex. Also, Nasu's favorite bitch, servant. Zap and Fry will have nightmares just looking at her. I mean, just look at her thighs in Avalon. What do you mean that's not a nightmare to you? Not surprisingly, Celtic Super Bitch doesn't skip leg day and thus has a super effective mod against guys, so she and Tama Lancer are besties in their no guys allowed clique. But since she still wants to get dicked every once in a while, she's also a surprisingly good damage support for your husbandos. Her most recent costume with Avalon is actually pretty nice, not gonna lie. Probably her best proof that she deserves to be called queen. Medusa, 3-star wave clear. As much as she's best girl of the original Fate Stay Night crew, clearly DW disagrees with how much they've simped for every other girl and left Medusa in the dust like her sisters do on a daily basis. That's fine though, she'll get a summer version or some other servant variant in the future, I'm sure. Copium. Surfdrid, 4-star arts meme. Lapras was the OG arts refund meme since she was the first servant in the game who had a high enough hit count on her MP to allow for full refunding, back when a full refund actually meant something instead of all these zoomer arts memes these days just abusing Castoria. Not that you couldn't just run Surfdrid with double Castoria, and in fact, she'll probably even like it too. Ozzy, 5-star Buster DPS, who's also a pillar man in his free time. He's Crony's favorite stand user and the only other guy in Chaldea who can give Gilgamesh's ego a run for its money. Also, he practices his laughs with Dondo when no one's looking. He's the first servant in the game to have a buff success buff, meaning that if you wanted to run Imperial privilege users and not mauled at your shitty RNG, Dio was a must-bring support. Conveniently, he also has IP of his own, so he can buff his own Imperial privilege to make it guaranteed, and it has a 20% party charge to go with it. Very nice. He went for a really long time without any buffs, and then all of a sudden DW dropped 2 big dick buffs for him that turned him into an even better crit rider than he already was, so that he can spam JoJo memes with the greatest of ease. Kets, 5-star luchadora. She loves watching NJPW, WWE, and whatever other pro wrestling or lucha libre leagues she can get her hands on whenever she's not practicing her own wrestling moves, preferably on Merlin. In-game, she's a single target buster rider who Izuna drops people in a way that would make Rock Lee jealous, but she also has a charisma and targetable 3-turn buster buff, making her quite a strong buster support. Just like Ozzy, she also got a buff to her charisma that also gives her stars, but unlike Ozzy, she gets 25 stars immediately, which pairs very well with her S3 that already made her a solid crit rider to begin with. Red Hair, 3-star quick wave clear. He's the Bojack Horseman of FGO, not that it stopped Gurako from grailing him anyway. He'll also be good friends with Amiya since they both like carrots. Reigns, 5-star support. Itsuki joins her brother and Scotty in the coveted 50% Chargers Club, at least when she gets her buff in NA next year or so. The fact that Hestia has 2 separate 20% charge skills means that she's now the premium plug suit charger in either refund or reload teams that need the extra charge, which is why you see her used so often in the Tamavich system videos for anyone who doesn't have a 50% battery to begin with. Ryoma, 4-star stand user with a stand, Oryu. He kinda has his work cut out for him since Rider Kentoki exists, but he's still not a bad single target arts rider on his own, especially if you don't have Rider Kentoki. Most people who grail him are actually trying to grail Oryu instead because she's cute, which is totally understandable because she likes green frogs. Speaking of Rider Kentoki, he's a 4-star quick DPS and arguably the best welfare servant in the game, and if not, at least top 2 or 3 depending on who you ask. If you have him, you almost don't need any other single target rider, and if you don't, well, get fucked. Ushi, 3-star quick DPS. There was a time in FGO when she was just another free-to-play rider who was just as shit as all the others, and people constantly bitched at DW to give her an animation update. Now, however, with all of her buffs, she's a reasonably strong budget single-target rider option if you either don't have Rider Kentoki or you're just an Ushi simp, and she has her animation update, and she has a costume, and if that weren't enough, she has an Avenger and Assassin version. Must feel great being an Ushi simp in 2021. And next up, casters. Anastasia, 5-star arts meme. Imagine being a Russian princess and getting shot to death by a bunch of commies only to be put into a weeb mobile game where she has to eat more bullets to get stronger. feels bad, man. She's meant to function as a utility arts caster with her attack debuff, stun, and skill seal, but she's mainly used to farm assassin enemies instead, which there are a lot of, especially in EOR and the early Lost Belts, so you can imagine how well she works when she starts hanging out with Castoria. Assclap, 3-star support. He's a very rare medic caster in FGO, the same niche as Media Lily and Earsveal, and true to his name, he's gonna clap your ass too if he finds out that you're retarded.
You're simply retarded.
Hey, you play FGO, you probably have some form of brain damage. He doesn't have any damage support skills, but he does have almost every other piece of utility instead. A fat heal with some debuff resist, MP seal with a party MP generation buff, and a 20% party charge with a party debuff clear. While I'd argue that Media Lily is still a better medic caster for longer battles or just for more effective heals, Asclepius is definitely a better challenge quest caster since his skills provide not only more utility to your team, but also more effective utility, so he functions the same as Martha from before as a plug suit support. Avrisbro, 3-star Golem Master, though I might give the Arknights players nightmares for calling him that. Thanks to his 80% battery, he's a reloader if you run mages to give him the extra 20%, so he can be a budget caster reloader in case you think having a limit broken scope is also budget friendly for some reason. He has a cute little third skill that can give his teammates invul stacks when he dies, which Castoria also finds pretty cute too. Babbage, 3-star Gundam, or whatever the Nasuver's equivalent of Gundam is. Actually, we know what they are, just look at what Odysseus and Europa have. He's a Buster DPS caster, and with all his buffs, a Buster crit meme. He's essentially a 3-star Proto-Artha since he also has a 30 star bomb and a crit damage buff, and he even has his own star weight buff too to make use of them. The one thing that DW won't give him is a buff to his attack rating, which is still his biggest issue, so good luck with that. The Gong, 2-star Arts God. Mr. Gong harnesses the power of China's nuclear arsenal to nuke the shit out of whatever you want him to. He also does this with the same competence as their space program and ends up killing one of your servants each time he nukes something, but ultimately no one gives a shit because he's too good at it. Cersei, 4-star Black Grail meme. The slightly more budget option to Sanzo, Rosemi Lovelock's best use is to nuke an assassin with Black Grail since she's one of the few servants in the game who can get full charge with a single button press. She also has some party utility with an AoE poison, defense debuff, party debuff cleanse, and even a modified stun on her NP, though it only works on certain enemies. Makes sense, seeing that they're all Hatons who are a special breed of degenerate to warrant being turned into pigs. Kucaster, 3-star Reloader. The perfect example of a servant in this game who went from WH Omega LOL to Pogplant over the course of literally one Lost Belt and the addition of some sadistic fox with a gun. Even with just his 30% charge, which he had before this, he was already good enough to be a reload meme just with a plug suit support like Reigns, but now that his latest buff basically gives him an on-command 80% battery, he can now combine it with Black Rail memes to make him possibly the most relevant 3-star servant in JP now. It's hilarious that he also has the best defensive skill in the game with PFA, but now he doesn't even need that anymore because he can just go full Nicolas Cage on everyone instead. Liz Caster, 4-star Wave Clear, if anyone cares about Liz Caster anymore. There's always a first for something, and for FGO welfare servants, well, she was it. She was good for her time since she was a Buster AoE caster whom you can get MP5 for free during a time when your only other options for Buster AoE casters back then were like Shakespeare and I guess Babbage, though Babbage came after Caster Liz with London. Unfortunately, she hasn't aged well at all into current FGO, especially not when the other Liz faces are doing much better than her meta-wise, even Saber Liz, who's basically missing a functional third skill. Also, no one wants DW to put old welfares back into the game more than she does, that's for damn sure. Geronimo, 3-star Dumpster Fire. He gets the award for laziest servant kit design by DW since there's now a certain red man in the game who literally gets Geronimo's entire skill set in one skill. For what it's worth, he's the only free-to-play caster who gets an Arts Mana Burst and has an upgraded NP, so some people look at that and think, well, that's not so bad. He does some good damage at least, Copium, which is kind of like praying that DW is going to make Ereshkigal into a Summer Servant this year. Now, imagine if they actually did that. Caster Gil, 4-star Art Support. Surprisingly, even someone like Gil can eventually learn to not constantly use Enkidu as a butt plug, and when he does, he's actually pretty cool. He's also worked himself to death once in Babylonia and bitches about it, which is kind of funny since the player base overworks some other casters to death multiple times over instead. His skill set is simple but strong, with a party star gen buff, charisma, and a 30% arts buff that comes with a 30% debuff success buff too, in case his teammates have debuffs of their own that they can use. In fact, his kit is strong enough to warrant some people to use him as an esports servant, where they keep him at level 60 intentionally and lure his skills as a situational challenge quest art support, as you can see here, though he might not like the fact that he's getting worked to death again. Caster Guild, 3-star Praying Mantis or something? Who gives a fuck? Also, not to be confused with the previous Caster Guild. He's supposed to be some kind of weird stun spammer, but he can't even do that right. He did get a buff to his second skill that was arguably the worst skill in the game because it didn't fucking do anything, so now it actually does do something, but that's kind of like Bethesda still working on Fallout 76 in current year trying to get people to play it again. Hans, 2-star support. Basically the waiver of free-to-play support casters back in the day when that actually meant something, in a time before people just spammed Merlin, Scotty, Castoria, and now Tomovich supports all day. He also has a grown-up form that you see in Summer 5 that actually matches his Dio voice a lot better. For some reason we didn't get that as a costume for him, probably because people cared more about the fact that Kiara got a lolly version at the same time to counterbalance Big Hans. Helena Caster, 4-star support. If Hans is the waiver of free-to-play support casters, then My Chemical Romance is the waiver before you get waiver, since she can support anyone with a party projection buff and party 20% charge. She did get a 30% charge at some point to her S2, which is nice, but that doesn't change the fact that she's only a temp support until you get waiver or another meta support caster. Ilya, 5-star Buster Nuke. She's a magical girl whose idea of making friends is shoving Ruby down your throat and telling you to live through it first. Despite having a caster deck, Ilya is very firmly a Buster caster because of her single target MP, and a setup one at that, since her MP debuffs her attack and defense every time she fucking uses it, making her more suited to fights that she can end in 1 or 2 MPs rather than any extended battle. Sanzo's better for that. And just in time for this video, she got a buff just the other week that gives her a 50% battery, which is actually legitimately one of the best buffs a servant can get in this game, as Ku Caster can attest to. Gee, DW, I wonder why you gave a single target Buster Caster a 50% battery. Kinda sus there, don't you think? Ares Veil, 4-star support. The second medic caster after Media Lily, Torpedo Tits is best known for the guts on her MP's overcharge. While other servants have party guts on their skills, Ilya's mom can spam hers since it's part of her MP, giving her a rare but essential role as a counter to insta-kill spammers like the King of Son challenge quest that one Nerofest. Too bad you can't get her again though. Da Vinci Caster, 5-star wave clear, I guess. Kirei giving her a hand in the Lost Belt Prelude is DW's attempt at a metaphor signifying how she's outlived her usefulness and that her lolly form is in command now, both in the story and in the game. She did get a buff to her S2, so now she gives a 20% party arts buff, but that alone's not going to bring her back from the grave, where she and most other pre-Lost Belt servants are buried. Marie Caster, 4-star support. Specifically, she's meant to be a crit support when Waver and even Hans already exists, so I don't know what the hell you'd use her for unless you're still stuck in 2017 and you still haven't gotten enough My Homies memes, or if your name is Kidishan, I guess. Media, 3-star knifey bitch. She's like that one creepy neighbor you may or may not have that has a large collection of knives for some reason that you're not entirely sure of, and you know they don't really have a reason to use them, or at least you think they don't. To be fair, Media is pretty creepy, just for a different reason. She's best known for her ability to instantly charge her NP and then stab a bitch in the face with her Rule Breaker, which in this game strips them of all their buffs. This in tandem with her full caster deck and a very high MP generation rate, and you can run her as an arts DPS, even with her gimped MP scaling, and play Psychopath Simulator by watching Media stab a motherfucker in the face repeatedly until they die, if that's your thing. Media Lily, 4-star support. The younger Media who's still batshit insane just in her own way, and the first dedicated medicaster in the game, Media Lily is one of the best, if not the best burst healer in the game. Not that most of you give a shit, because who the actual fuck uses medicasters when people like Waver, Merlin, not you, Castoria, and now Tomovich exist? Her kit does have a few things going for it. She has double party heals, one on a skill and the other on her NP, an insta charge, a debuff clear, party debuff resist, and a 3-turn buff buff removal resist for one teammate when most buff removal resist effects are only for one time or one turn in the game. Theoretically, this should make her a nice support to bring for long fights, but Merlin is usually better anyway most of the time. For what it's worth, she was one of the few servants who was able to solo the full power Kiara fight back in the CCC events, but honestly, what kind of disease would you need to have to do that? Not just once, mind you, but twice. Mephistopheles, 3-star support. When she's not VTubing in her spare time, Polka takes lessons on how to be an absolute clown from this guy. His best use by far is as a buff blocker, since he's probably the only servant in the game who has a 3-time buff block on a skill. He also has an upgraded MP and a buff to his second skill that now gives him 30% extra damage, but since his name isn't Ku Caster, no one's gonna give a shit. We truly live in a society, don't we? Merlin, 5-star, yep cock! That is all. Miyu, 4-star support. I was gonna make a joke about how Miyu's now the rarest 4-star servant in the game now that Fujino's gotten a second rate up, and then just the other week, DW drops another Ilya movie banner on JP that also has Miyu on it, like they were reading my mind, oh boy. Or maybe I'm actually giving them ideas for free? I demand royalties, Delightworks! Along with the second rate up, she finally gets a buff to her NP, thank fucking god. So now she goes from a mostly garbage support caster to a slightly less trash one. In all seriousness though, her MP buff is actually pretty damn strong, because not only does it get rid of her HP demerit that was its biggest problem, but it also gives a stronger HP regen effect and, more importantly, a unique charisma regen effect that lets her give the party up to a 60% attack buff on its third turn of activation. While it probably won't shake up the caster support meta anytime soon, the buff does make it so that you can actually feasibly run Miyu support now without turning her into a true Meguka. Murasaki Shion, 5-star arts meme. Her kit is quite packed with all kinds of relevant utility. Then Castoria came along and told her to not give a shit about most of those things, so now neither should you. Nerocaster, 5-star reloader. If you've ever wondered where Crony got those white crossovers that support her boobas, it's from her older sister who likes cosplaying as a Tenga for some reason. Like the others in the 5-star Farmers Club, Nerocaster has always been a god tier farmer, so she and Anastasia fulfill the same role of being royalty in their past lives but getting their asses worked like some plebs in some weeb-ass mobile game. Just like Anastasia's had Castoria's support for the past year, so too does Nerocaster now have Tomovich support to level the odds, so now it should just be a matter of who you like farming with more. Nidacris, 4-star farming goddess. She's less of an arts meme thanks to the fact that her MP can insta-kill and thus give her no refund, and more so just a good old-fashioned wave clear. The gimmick that she uniquely has is the fact that she's an AoE servant with an instant 100% battery, which no other servant in the game has, unless you count KP, which I don't since that shit ain't instant like Nido's. She's part of the crew of essential farming servants for any self-respecting FGO account. Yes, I'm aware that I've been memeing about metacasters for literally this entire video, but if you don't have any of them, you're just gonna have to farm in this game the good old-fashioned way, and Nidacris can potentially make your life a lot easier, especially when it comes to farming bones, because I know y'all never stop needing that shit. Cursory Rhyme, 4-star book lolly. Little did you know, but she's actually Lisa's daughter, and she's here to tell you that you need to return your overdue books, otherwise she's gonna pop a cap in your ass. She's the game's first instance of a crit caster thanks to her first skill, and the first servant to get a weird 40% battery, which isn't as awkward as it used to be thanks to the second append skill that everyone gets, but this is assuming you still use Nursery Rhyme like it's 2015 all over again. Paracelsus, 3-star art support. He's always the first one killed or voted out in Chaldea Among Us games because of the last 3 letters in his name. He's also Bales' favorite servant because he more or less looks like a K-pop reject. In-game, he's a budget arts refund support with his third skill that has a targetable 50% MP gen buff, and he can even clear a wave on his own with his AoE MP if he has to. Speaking of doing damage, he actually fits into the double Castoria system, though unfortunately his 3-star stats limit him to just farming assassins. Tichuba, 4-star buster and art support. No prizes as to why I call her that. She has a unique party buster and arts buff, which allows her to support either color or both at the same time. She also has a bit of potential to be a crit caster who can pierce invul, but good luck trying to get her cards some crit stars without some serious help. Scotty, 5-star quick meme. When she was released, she revolutionized how FGO players farmed by taking the refund concept first made possible by Tamamo, Surfdread, and Nerobride and making it much more accessible to the average player, if having a limit-broken kaleidoscope counts as accessible. She enjoyed a full 2 years of getting her ass railed by the player base who abused the shit out of her before Castoria finally retired her and put her in a nursing home for defunct non-meta FGO servants so that she could get her own ass railed too for the next year after that, but DW didn't think Scotty suffered enough, clearly, so they dragged her ass back out with a support list update for Summer 6. Scheherazade, 5-star arts meme. She's in the same boat as Murasaki in that her kit has some useful utility for certain situations that gets totally disregarded in the face of double Castoria. Just like how Murasaki has an anti-demonic power mod, Chex Mix has a super effective mod against king enemies, so do keep that in mind on the off chance that you actually run into a farming node with an enemy king in it. Shuten Caster, 4-star Buster DPS, I guess. She's got a mismatched dex, so that doesn't do her damage any favors, but she's still a welfare single target Buster caster with an anti-demonic power mod, which is always nice. She can also be used as a burst crit too if you like watching her shoot bananas out of a rocket launcher like she's on a Donkey Kong game. Zeeg, 4-star cardboard. People found out he's quite a good arts looper, in part because he's welfare, so with double Castoria, that's some hard-hitting cardboard right there. Be careful who you make fun of in school, for real. Tamamo, 5-star waifu. The OG arts meme and the first truly broken support caster in FGO, straight out of Fate Extra. I remember last year when people were like, oh my god, Castoria's replacing Tamo, and shit like that. Thank god I'm not retarded. Finnegan Fox's unique effect is her ability to reduce skill cooldowns on her NP. This single-handedly elevated arts teams to another dimension, in a way no one else could until Merlin came along, I guess. Either way, while Castoria is definitely taken over the whole arts farming stuff now, Tamamo is still the backbone of arts teams because of that ability of hers to spam skill cooldown reductions along with the rest of the shit on her NP. In fact, last year I specifically called that the new art support duo would be Tamamo Castoria, and look what happened. NA players do have Clairvoyance EX after all, what can I say? Edison, 4-star support? Seriously, other than being a budget trump, what the fuck are you? Botan's weird uncle is some sort of 500 IQ alternative support with the third skill that overcharges a teammate's MP by 2 stages, and his first skill that, more recently, now reduces a teammate's skill cooldowns by 1. Not that this matters since nobody fucking used him before, and certainly no one's gonna use him now. Waver, 5-star support god. The Mr. Worldwide of FGO and the OG overworked support caster. People sometimes tell new players that if they can manage to roll this guy, they've practically already beaten the game, and realistically, they're not wrong. 50% charge is a hell of a drug, kids. Shakespeare, 2-star Buster support. He's more or less the free-to-play version of Merlin if you like oversimplifying things, but in most cases, he's used as a plug suit budget Buster support. Also, his favorite action movie series is Kingsman. Mozart, 1-star art support. Specifically, he's an arts crit support with a skill set that could have easily been on a 4-star servant, and people wouldn't have complained, honestly, because his third skill at max level is an instant 50 stars for that turn, no questions asked. He already had a 1-turn party arts buff to go with that to make everyone's arts crits go brrr, but DW somehow thought he wasn't strong enough? And gave him a 3-turn arts resist debuff that he can put on one enemy. So, to repeat, Mozart is a 1-star, a fucking 1-star servant who can give your team an almost 65% arts buff against one enemy, along with guaranteeing your team's crits for that turn and reducing that enemy's crit chance by 20% for 3 turns. Arts Chad stay winning, I guess. Sanzo, 5-star Buster DPS. She's the original Black Grail meme since she has an 80% battery that works conveniently well with Merlin's buffs for a turn 1 palm strike from hell. Now that she's got a charisma on her S2, she can now act as a flex and support her team even better between that and her S3, and the recent append skills make it so that she can potentially Black Grail turn 1 nuke all on her own now. She and Ilya share the role of single target caster nukers, with the difference being Ilya is a burst nuker who can only use her MP once or twice before her damage goes to shit, while Sanzo is a more consistent nuker whose MP might be weaker individually but can spam it with no downsides that Ilya has to deal with. Also, E Honda would be proud of Sanzo's 100 hand slaps. Done with the casters, now for the assassins. Carmilla, 4-star waifu hunter. Fua's favorite servant if you can find the proper nuke codes. She and Jack share the niche of being assassins who deal extra damage to female enemies, so if your name is Plushy Mistress, then you can pretend that Jack is your daughter together if you're into that. Charles Henry Sanson, 2-star Evil Hunter, I guess, though no one calls him that. His niche gives him a power mod against evil enemies, but it also gives him a power mod against human enemies, which is bad because the human trait applies to enemies who are both human and still alive, which means servants don't actually apply here. They do have the humanoid trait, but that's something different. Welcome to FGO. So Charles is basically the OG Sabers in that he basically doesn't have a functional third skill. In fact, these days he gets used more as a chat command in Honako's stream than as an actual servant in-game. Charlotte Corday, 1-star arts DPS. She's one of the very rare examples of servants who historically had big booba, so this isn't just fan service, this is historical accuracy, something that even AAA video game publishers can't seem to understand these days. She's a 1-star with both invul and defense pierce, and while her third skill is an RNG damage buff, at least the 3 things that you can get from it are all useful, so you can legit use her as a budget arts DPS, though her 1-star stats will definitely hold her back quite a bit. Cleo, 5-star Michael Jackson fangirl. In this day and age when all the ladies stan cute K-pop boys, Cleo takes it back old school and stans Demia to the point where she's learned how to moonwalk as part of her attack animations. Her kit doesn't offer anything particularly special, but her best feature is her ludicrously high MP generation rate, making her a buster DPS assassin who can spam her NP at a respectable rate. And since she has an NP buff, if she can hit her Imperial Privileges attack buff, she can also do good damage too. Keyword if. Assassin 230, 4-star Python. She has one of the hottest designs in the whole game, so hot in fact that the CCP had to censor her because they think it's not, quote, historically accurate, plays a huge role in the Lost Belt storyline, and turns out to be a goddamn true ancestor or something. She's also one of the most useless assassins in the game. Carrie, 4-star arts DPS. Friendly reminder that his son got his Magecraft skill buffed twice in a row, while Carrie still has to deal with the same thing without any buffs of his own. Also, he's called Magus Killer in a game where casters stomp his ass. Where's the lore accuracy in this one, DW? Thanks to his high hit counts and his assassin class, Carrie is both an arts DPS and arts Stargen at the same time, so if you run him in arts teams with double support caster setups, your casters can charge up their MPs a lot faster with more frequent crits thanks to Carrie's face cards. He and Assassin Shikis share the same role, and the advantages that he has over her are better Stargen, a targetable taunt to control enemy attacks, 3-turn invul pierce as opposed to Shiki's 1-turn, and a charge drain on his MP. Generally speaking, Shiki is the more preferred arts DPS, but sometimes Carrie's extra utility can come in really handy. Kotaro, 3-star support. Every rarity in the Assassin class has its designated star generator, and for the 3 stars, it's Hamtaro. Not that it matters since manual Stargen is for losers when you have people like Merlin to give you all the Stargen you need. Thankfully, Stargen isn't the only thing Kotaro can do. He has a lot of debuffs that he can put onto enemies to fuck him over, like a double defense debuff, 1-time buff block, attack debuff, and crit chance debuff. He also has a debuff resist debuff to make sure that the rest of his debuffs last properly. Also, take a shot every time I said the word debuff. Gray, 4-star Zombie Slayer. Her first skill gives her a strong power mod against undead enemies, so with her other self buffs and the fact that she's welfare and therefore MP5, she can bully Ollie the same way that Iris did that one time. Cursestorm, 2-star support, mainly Stargen. Almost everything he does is produce stars since he comes from a day and age in FGO when you had to manually produce your own crit stars, like a real man. What an alpha! DW gave him an interesting buff recently that lets him refund off a successful insta-kill on his NP, which is the first time they've ever done something like that. Obviously it's not going to help him do any better against bosses, but it does let him kill trash mobs faster and get stronger while doing it, if that means anything of course. 100 Face, 3-star arts DPS. Ironically, despite her own name, she actually plays best as a solo assassin like Baldy from earlier, since she can loop her own MP into itself and has decent sustain. And friendly reminder that before Bargus made the whole ripped ladies fetish in FGO more popular, we had 100 Face. Serenity, 3-star support. She's a very heavy debuffer with an emphasis on poisoning enemies and constantly stacking more poison onto them, except that's not really a thing in this game. While some of her debuffs are good, the fact that a big part of her kit revolves around poison stacking makes her a subpar support unless there's an attrition fight somewhere that calls for DOT damage. Not that you should care since she got a costume recently, and that's all that really matters. King Hassan, 5-star Unga Bunga, the only assassin in the game with a Berserker deck because there's no other way to adequately convey how little fucks he gives. His skills basically amount to him bonking you harder with a sword for being too horny. Jekyll and Hyde, 3-star Disaster, GW's first and only attempt at a stance character in FGO, unless you count Dioscuri for some reason, but they fucked it up so badly that they never tried it again ever since. It's not hard to make a proper stance character in FGO either, they just need to use my servant profile that I made for Fubuki and pay me in Saint Quartz to feed my gacha addiction. Jack, 5-star Quick Flex, the best manual star gen in the game, if anyone cares for that anymore, but Stabby Lolly also gets a power mod against female enemies like her mom Carmilla. She also comes with a single target buff removal and a very low cooldown heal because she's a good girl and deserves all your head pats. Just make sure to keep her in her first ascension, otherwise I'ma call the CCP on you like I'm from West Taiwan. Joshikose, 3-star quick DPS. She has a thing for killing anyone who's royalty. I don't know if we have a name for that kind of fetish or what. Anyways, the whole idea with her is that she bonks king or queen enemies, softens them up with her quick cards, and uses her own stars for some big burst crit damage. But most people prefer to just throw Kama with double Scotty at whatever rider enemy they see, just because that's so much easier. Speaking of Kama, she's a 5-star quick DPS, no surprise. As if double Scotty weren't enough, she even has her own 50% battery for instant Black Grail memes, along with a 30% attack, but that also gives her an infinite guts on a 6-turn cooldown, like she really needed that. The bias! And her third skill gives her temporary full class advantage against alter egos before pretenders were even a thing. Basically, she's one of the best assassins in the game, if not the best straight up. Real talk though, her best feature is her April Fool's art. Just look at that smile. Donzo, 4-star support, I think. Roboco can give an evade and invul separately on 2 skills, which is something no one else in the game can do for what that's worth, but that's really all she can do, other than clear a wave since she's got a Buster AoE MP that does have a super effective mod against demonic enemies, so you might actually use it unironically in some cases. Her NP buff now lets her give the team a Buster buff when she uses it, so she kinda has the same role as Osaka Behemoth Archer from earlier, in that they're meant to be wave 1 clears, so that their teammates can use their Buster buffs for the other 2 waves. Again, this usually doesn't mean shit, since reloading is all the rage right now. Li Shuan Assassin, 5-star Arts DPS. With only 1 quick card, Ip Man isn't a very good star gen, relatively speaking, but it's 2021, no one gives a shit about manual star gen anymore. Besides, he more than makes up for that by having solid, reliable damage output that most other assassins just don't have, with his 2 Buster cards and an MP buff that really didn't do anything other than giving him higher multipliers on his MP damage itself. But then again, he didn't really need anything else anyway. Matahari, 1-star support. Even before her recent buff, she was a support monster because she has 3 separate defense debuffs, along with a skill seal and attack debuff, but now she literally gets Caster Gill's first skill, and a party crit damage buff on top of that, both for 3 turns. So just like Mozart, Matahari is now a Giga Chad 1-star support goddess. Not that most of you care, but she'll be there when you need her for whatever reason. Mochi, 4-star Arts DPS. She's the third of the Ayaneru trio along with Musashi and Maeve, but unfortunately the most neglected because, like Serenity, part of her kit revolves around poison debuffs, and you already know how that's gonna end up. She does have a 30% charge and a 3-turn arts buff along with an upgraded MP, so functionally, she serves as a replacement Assassin Shiki in case you didn't play either of the K&K events. MHX, 5-star quick DPS. Once upon a time in an FGO far, far away, MHX was considered one of the worst 5-stars in the game because of how wacky her kit was. Boy, have times changed since then. She's the first servant in the game to get every part of her kit buffed, all 3 skills and her NP. At least I think so. It should be the reason why whenever another servant gets 4 buffs like this, we call it the MHX treatment. So now, with all these buffs and her third Appen skill that gives her even more damage against Sabers, MHX is now a neutral damage powerhouse and can actually reasonably fight Saber enemies like she's supposed to in lore, though her lightsaber fights with them will probably go something like this. Assassin Chris, 4-star Arts Lupin. Fuck. She would have been a great arts looper since her MP has the hit counts for it and her MP generation stat is good enough, But the insta-kill gimmick ruins any chance that she had at being one, and DW reserved the whole refund before insta-kill mechanic for Summer Kiara and fucked over Assassin Nito in the process. And since she doesn't have an insta-charge like her caster form does, no one fucking uses her. The medgem memes we got out of her are pretty nice though. Izo, 3-star edgelord! With the power of shitty DeviantArt fan art and fanfiction.net stories, Sasuke is an arts DPS who can generate stars off his art's Brave Chain, then use them to crit the shit out of humanoid targets. Don't listen to him, by the way, when he tells you that his edginess isn't just a phase. Jetpack Okuta, 4-star waiver face. Why the fuck did Takeuchi give her Waver's pose anyway? She's a Scotty meme, just not very good at it. The fact that her MP has a 60% chance to stun her own ass afterwards means that if the stun does land, she can't actually use any of her own face cards after the NP. At least she can Scotty meme, because without it, she would just be a meme. Osakabe Hime, 5-star support. Kaguya is an unfortunate example of a support servant who has good buffs, but in the wrong places. Specifically, the Buster and Quick buffs on her MP's Overcharge should be on a skill instead, and maybe people would actually use her as an alternative support at the very least. As she is now though, she's meant to be a defensive support with a medley of offensive utility, but that lack of focus in her utility means that she's not really good in anything that she does, so unless you go out of your way to use her, you're not going to feel compelled to bring her along anywhere. Not that she minds at all, the fact that no one really uses her means that she gets to stay in her room all day and play gacha games like the rest of us do. Phantom, 2-star who? Assassin Shiki, 4-star arts DPS. The gold standard for 4-star arts DPS is in the assassin class. Since I was comparing her to Carry earlier, the things that Shiki has over him are better damage output, more consistent MP gen, a 30% battery, and a hard defense skill in her evade to give her better survivability, all of which are just more useful effects to have as a DPS than what Carry has to offer, so generally speaking, Shiki is the best single target 4-star arts assassin. If you have her. Sasaki Kojiro, 1-star Regent, or the Savior of France if you prefer that. He's a quick crit assassin who's incentivized to use his quick cards as much as possible and is rewarded for it, which is great since most of his deck is quick cards anyway, unsurprisingly. His 1-star stats really hold him back as you might expect though, so if DW does actually get around to making a Saber version of him someday, and he does have the same kit as he does here, then it might actually mean something now that Scotty's back out of retirement. Ascat, 4-star Scotty Looper, kinda. She's not that great at it, but again, like Okita J, at least it's better than being good at nothing. I don't think DW thought this one through when they decided to make a welfare Skaha an assassin, but again, no one cares since you can't even get her anymore. Samaramis, 5-star Reloader. She used to have damage issues like Ereshkigal, so thankfully she got an MP buff to fix that, and more recently Tomovich for good measure so you never have to worry about your semi-truck not being able to properly isekai people ever again. The fact that her third skill needing 8 crit stars is annoying, but with Tomovich I guess you don't need it anymore anyway. Shuten Doji, 5-star support? Flex? Something in between? She was the first functional AoE assassin back in the day, which she was pretty good at since she has a pretty high attack rating for an assassin and a great damage skill in her demonic charisma. She also has a plethora of utility, most of which is on her NP that slaps enemies with all the goddamn debuffs in the game, so you could use her as part of Art's stall teams if you like wasting your life that much on mobile games. Unfortunately, even with an NP buff and a 30% battery added to her third skill, Shuten didn't really age that well since her one-hit NP obviously isn't good enough for double Castoria memes. But then again, DW gave her a cute costume so no one gives a shit. Steno, 4-star Spook. You do not know the true FGO gacha experience until you've been spooked by this girl at least once during your time playing this fucking game. For all the gacha salt memes associated with her though, she's actually not a bad support. She has a double charisma for divine allies, which works on herself for some reason, a charge drain, defense debuff, and a buff removal, and she's part of the Charmlock crew with her sisters Yuri and either Medusa or Gorgon. Honestly, the biggest joke about her now is that she has a third Appen skill that gives her bonus damage against riders, as though DW somehow thinks that giving her that is gonna convince people to suddenly use her as a DPS assassin. Assassin Ushi, 4-star Scotty meme, kinda. She and Yanqing are the two best manual 4-star star gens if you still care about that, but again, you care more about the fact that she's Scotty compatible. Assassin 170, 4-star Quick Flex. She, Chloe, and Steno make up the Smug Lolly Club in Chaldea and will regularly remind you of how much of a dumb poor you are, But hey, at least now you can make fun of her back for being called Gold Assassin in her home country. Believe it or not, smug Chinese Empress Lolly was not only the best quick support before Scotty, but she's also one of the strongest single target assassins, granted if she gets her IP's attack buff. Honestly, she's still one of the strongest single target assassins thanks to her MP buff and her S1 buff that made her defense debuff stronger, so try not to piss off your own Chinese granny Lolly. Yanqing, 4-star flex. Similar to Regin, Shining Fingers' kit is built around him generating stars and using those stars to crit and make even more stars, rinse and repeat. He's actually very good at this, but the problem, again, is the fact that he exists in a game where Merlin also exists, which is yet another bruh moment in FGO. Assassins covered, moving on to the Berserkers. Godjuna, 5-star. Nekopara Catboy's rejects gimmick is his first skill that lets him nuke the crap out of anything that's got a debuff like he's a StarCraft 2 ghost. And guess what? His MP's overcharge puts a buster resist down on enemies first before his MP does damage so that he can trigger his own power mod. This gives him unbelievable nuking power in a game where DW for the first 3 years of the game was scared as shit to make an AoE Berserker too strong, but I guess starting with Godjuna they kinda stopped giving a shit and started going batshit insane. Morgan from the future says hello, by the way. Asterius, 1-star fluffy boy. He's a weird hybrid berserker where his skill set gives him offensive and defensive buffs, but his MP is nothing but debuff utility. Since berserkers are usually known for returning to Monkey and smashing big red buttons, Minotaur is usually known for his MP since it's something you wouldn't expect a Zerk like him to have. The game also considers him a child servant, by the way. Nyalter, 4-star quick DPS, except her S1 buff now gives her Buster card some exclusive crit damage, so I guess she's a hybrid quick and Buster DPS. As you can guess, she's a burst crit Zerk who can easily toggle between quick and Buster crit damage thanks to that buff I just mentioned. Also, I know y'all are a bunch of degenerate motherfuckers who coom over tramp stamps, but personally, I think she looks best in her first stage. Beowulf, 4-star Unga Bunga. Maverick uses his caliber for his DMR in Siege, which is also used to hunt hogs down in the deep south. Suddenly, Beowulf and his whole fighting big animals thing makes a little more sense. With his bust, Beo's now a monster of a burst crit Zerk who also has power mod advantage against both big chungus enemies and dragon enemies. These two stack, so whenever you see a big old Drago that needs bullying, Beo can smack him around for you. So again, hide your Illyras, hide your Selens, hide your Zentreas. Caligula, 2-star Unga Bunga, just in a slightly different way, kind of. Like Asterius, Cauliflower also has an arts utility NP, but with a skill set that gives him a ton of buffs. But, unlike Asterius, his playstyle revolves mainly around his skill set because every single one of his skills gives him a damage buff of some kind, one of which gives him a mana burst on a 3-turn cooldown. This hilariously gives him a niche as a free-to-play DPS option for people who like min-turning challenge quests with lower rarity units. Also, Mona has a little explaining to do as to why she made him go insane. Cha-Cha, real smooth, 4-star wave clear. If Wu Zetian is FGO's resident granny lolly, then Cha-Cha's your resident auntie lolly. I mean, she even says so herself. She doesn't really do much other than sit around your Chaldea drinking green tea and eating snacks all day, but she still is a completely free MP5 welfare berserker, so that's worth something, probably. But then again, you can't get her anymore, and you'd probably rather use Bunyan over her anyway. Ku Alter, 5-star survival DPS. In a game where berserkers are glass cannons, Dino Ku would rather stay alive longer so that he can do more damage. Why other Zerks don't have the same Sigma male grind set that he does, I have no idea. Also, he really didn't need an MP buff because he did plenty of damage already, at least in my opinion, but clearly DW didn't share that opinion and gave him an MP buff anyway, which now lets him get rid of defensive buffs first before he does damage so you know he's going in raw. I bet May would like that too. Darius, 3-star Dunk Master. For a guy who's supposed to be Iskander's greatest historical rival, you'd think he'd be a little more prominent in the game, but I guess along that logic, since no one gives a shit about Iskander, no one cares about Darius either, so the logic checks out, I guess. He's a wave clear, short and simple. He's got buffs to his S3 and his MP so that he's a better wave clear, but overall the more interesting Darius is the one you can get pentakills with. Eric, 2-star, who the fuck are you? He's another budget wave clearer who's surprisingly stronger than he lets on because his MP has a free 30% attack buff as its overcharged, so he feels like he's doing 3-star damage as a 2-star. But nobody knows that since everyone forgot that this dude existed, including DW for a long time too, until they made a Christmas Sea with him on it, well, at least until Guildfest 2 when he came up as a challenge quest. Fran, 4-star cutie pie. Like many year 1 Zerks, she's also a wave clear, but she's really good at it. In fact, she's the only Zerk in the game to have unique multipliers on her NP, and she has an NP buff on top of that. She can even Scotty loop too, though she'll need a debuff clearer like BB or Nightingale to help her do so properly since she kinda stuns herself every time she uses her NP. Heracles, 4-star survival DPS. The original "why won't you fucking die" meme in FGO and the hard carry for any FGO account that's less than a few weeks old, which is why Reddit and a lot of other people, myself included, always tell you to start with Herc from the tutorial role if you can. He got a buff recently that gives him more buster buffs the more times he uses his guts, so if you can run him with Snow Castle, that's potentially an 80% buster buff right there that he has for 5 turns each, which is pretty fucking nutty for a Zerk like him. Reddit was right after all, what a surprise. Just ignore all the retards who use FGA and brag post on the subreddit and you'll be fine. Hichikata, 5-star mayo boy. His favorite food is pickled radish with mayonnaise, don't question it. He's a crit Zerk who also has Ann and Mary's 1 HP gimmick, but it applies to both his crit damage and his NP, though he needs to use his S3 first to get the extra crit damage. He's the mobile game equivalent of playing Doom on Ultra Nightmare. Berserker Ibaraki, 4-star banana. Remember kids, a banana a day keeps the Avengers away. Wait. Now with her S2 buff, she's a flex berserker with a demonic charisma and her buffed second skill that's a targetable debuff clear and a 100% crit damage buff. She also specifically increases Shuten Doji's attack because they're homies. Get yourself a friend who will hang out with you the way Ibaraki hangs out with Shuten. Oh wait, you play FGO, you have no friends. Zolter, 4-star weeb. And no, calling her jerker isn't funny, it's cringe. She's a welfare single target berserker, so everyone should have access to an MP5 single target berserker now. Does she do anything else besides that? No, not really, but she's hot, her swimsuit's hot, and the dojins people make of her are hot, so who cares? Kyo, 3-star stalker. FGO's first yandere meme, but nowadays she's better known for being a meme character in Rio's comics and frequently having hate sex with Liz when Gurako isn't around for her to stalk. Zerkerlot, 4-star Scotty meme. He and Dantes are the 2 premier Scotty memers, and in some farming nodes, Lancelot is actually better because of his berserker advantage. While his Saber version might be a little confused as to why he has 2 Daughteroos now, Zerkerlot's wasting no time on his own in teaching his new Daughteru the ways of meme farming in FGO now that Scotty's back out of retirement. Lubu, 3-star DPS, which most other berserkers are too, what a surprise. He kinda looks like a Dynasty Warriors reject if you're into that. Oh, and he's the real Lubu, not red hair. Raiko, 5-star mom. The very first AoE 5-star Zerk in FGO, but unfortunately she's been power crept by some anorexic Indian god who looks like a cat boy. She does have an MP buff, and DW also buffed her S1 after God Juna came out in a pathetic attempt to make her relevant again, so now she's technically a better crit Zerk than he is, but why care about crits when your MP can just kill everything anyway? Also, I think Raiko and Saberlot have a little explaining to do as to why there's a lolly Lancelot running around carpet bombing people. Summer Musashi, 5-star USA, USA, USA. She's the game's first arts AoE berserker, so you can imagine how broken that is. Actually, she won't be truly broken until Castoria shows up, and for NA, that's still a year out from now, just about. So you NA players just gotta keep Scotty memeing. Mori Nagayoshi, 3-star buster DPS, just like everyone else. He's one of 2 or so limited 3-stars in FGO along with Izo because DW thought that making limited 3-star servants of all things was a good fucking idea. Other than being a knockoff Rance, Mori is also Callie's long-lost brother, so, Hololive collaboration confirmed? MHXA, 5-star Sith Lord waifu. She's a quick DPS Zerk, as opposed to the usual Buster DPS, who can force choke people to potentially steal their stars and use them to have unlimited power! She's also a Starbucks addict who will steal all your Starbucks gift cards when you're not looking, and she hangs out with Mr. X in Raccoon City in her free time to learn how she can give it to you like he can. Nightingale, 5-star support. God knows we need her an ass clap right now to shove vaccines down the throats of people who haven't gotten them yet for whatever reason. She was the OG 50% buster buff support for about 6 or so months before Merlin came along and said, it's free real estate, so the most use she gets nowadays is as a debuff immunity support, if that even matters anymore, now that Tomovich is a thing too. Nobu Zerk, 4-star metalhead. She loves every Japanese rock and metal band in existence, and Daisuke Ishiwatari is her favorite composer because she's low-key a big fan of Guilty Gear. She mains Soul and Stride, by the way. She's a single target Zerk with a super effective mod against divine enemies, so if there's a god or goddess out there somewhere who's giving you some trouble, just give Nobu Zerk some speakers and she'll turn them into a shitty JoJo reference for you. Bunyan, 1-star MP skip button, or at least the closest we'll ever get to having one. Everyone knows Paul for her insane farming ability, but she's actually also an insane support Zerk at the same time, considering she's just a 1-star, because she has both a party buster buff and AoE defense debuff. Support skills like these are godlike on a 1-star, and it shows since people run esports bunions for a lot of challenge quest TAs. What is it with 1-stars in this game being so goddamn good? Penicillin, 4-star flex. She was part of the woke movement and hashtag #MeToo, all because Achilles thought she was cute, and so she believes identifying yourself as a male is a crime punishable by death. IRL jokes aside, Penth has a power mod against Greek mythology males because she somehow thinks that they're all Achilles. Don't ask me how that shit works. Like Bunyan, she's also a great support buffer with her charisma and party buster buff, and she has a costume that gives her a net worth of $193.5 billion. Not bad for a pair of glasses. Zerk Toki, 5-star All Might. The original Unga Bunga Black Grail meme and boss slayer, because having a 50% battery and being a berserker in a game where waiver exists made you top tier for a solid year or two. Times have changed now, so he's more of a He-Man meme than anything else, but they did give him a costume and an MP buff, so here's to hoping he gets a few more buffs so he can return to being a top tier single target Zerk again, if Tomovich hasn't already done that. Salome, or Salome, how do you fucking say her name? 2-star Booba. She has a power mod specifically against lawful good enemies. They have to be both, I think, but it does give her some solid damage considering she's only a 2-star. Her other gimmick is to charge her party's MP gauges by 100% if she can stay alive for 7 turns, and she removes her own defensive buffs while doing it, so good luck with that. Also, that thing that makes her yeet her own defensive buffs is apparently called Dance of Lewdness, so GW isn't even trying to hide the fact that her booba are lethal. Spartacus, 1-star Oppression! Everything is oppression to him. Bad gotcha rates, you because you're a filthy casual, Delightworks for not making more bronze servants like him, and Gravity. He'll also go start a rebellion somewhere in his free time if you're not keeping an eye on him. The real irony is the fact that he's one of the best free-to-play farmers in the game, so he's used all the time during lottery events by players who are too poor to afford metacasters. Oppressors! Tamacat, 4-star fox, cat, dog, something. Go ask Fubuki if this is one of her people. She's part of the what the fuck are you supposed to do club with the Astolfo, because just like him, her skills are all over the place and so is her brain. At least it's possible to make someone like Fran a Scotty meme at least. Tamacat thinks that shit's for suckers and would rather be a waitress at Ruby's. Rad Vlad, 5-star arts meme. His story in FGO is actually a lot like Dondo's. They were both one of a kind back when they first debuted, with Vlad being the only 5-star berserker at the time of the game's release, and Dondo being the game's first Avenger, only to be replaced rather quickly by another 5-star who came after them, in the same class that is, and finally getting dragged out of bottom tier by their respective metacasters. He's also the first servant in the game to get not just 1 but 2 MP buffs. This is because Vlad actually had below average MP scaling to start with, thanks to DW being a bunch of fucking pussies who thought he'd break the game if they gave him normal multipliers when the game first came out. So his first MP buff was to give him those normal multipliers that he should have had at the start, and his second buff, it gave him the proper buff scaling that everyone else gets. Friendly reminder that Delightworks is a small indie developer studio. They don't know what the fuck they're doing sometimes, but that's okay. They'll figure things out eventually if you give them enough years to think them through. Shangyu, 5-star crit Zerk who looks like he's straight out of a Souls game. He can't Scotty loop, which is unfortunate, but hey, you already have Zerkerlot for that. Instead, he's a burst crit monster whose game plan is to use his MP on a trash wave first so that he can take the stars that he makes there into a boss wave and crit the shit out of them. He also has a 3-turn Invul Pierce to help him with that, so he has very good challenge quest potential, especially ones where enemies have Invul that would be otherwise annoying to deal with. Zerk's done. Last but certainly not least, we've got the extras. Abby, 5-star, stop with the fucking mismatched decks already, god. She's a flex servant who leans towards the support side most of the time since her skills are all support based, but she can get serious if you want her to since she has a single target MP that removes her target's buffs before it deals damage. It also involves slapping the shit out of people with her tentacles the same way Fauna slaps people with Wigglytuff, so they're both slap gods in their own rights. Abigail has a kind of kit that is very convenient for newer players to have, and she's a foreigner and thus has full class class advantage against enemy Berserkers, who are typically the toughest enemies for newer players to deal with, since they're not likely to have servants yet who can deal big enough damage. Overall, she's a good girl who deserves all your head pats and pancakes if you know how to make them. Speaking of pancakes, she's actually Johnny Bravo's daughter, in case you weren't aware, and they enjoy eating slapjacks and pancakes together, or so I'd like to think. The Wrong Shiro, 5-star Buster DPS. The closest we'll get to having a P5 collaboration in FGO with this costume. Looking good, Ruler. His claim to fame is his AoE MP that has the infamous property of removing buffs on all its targets before doing damage. In fact, he and Abby both had this effect, and I've made the joke before that Abby kinda stole it from him, or at least learned it from him. But if you ever run into him as an enemy, kill his ass first, no matter what. Another Wrong Shiro, 0-star Angry Mango. One of the biggest memes in the game because you can only get him out of the friend point gacha. He's possibly even rarer than 5-star servants, and he's complete dog shit. He's also the only 0-star servant in the game, though for technical purposes, the game treats him like a 2-star, and when you grail him, his border always stays black, unlike everyone else's. Very cool. He's also the only one in the game who can deal what's called true damage through his NP, which is damage that cannot be blocked or resisted at all. But in exchange, it's not affected by class advantage because the amount of damage he does is directly proportional to how much damage he's taken a turn after he's used his MP. So it sounds cool until you realize that he's still trash and that you wasted your grails on him. Sally, 3-star Edgelord. His trigger word is Mozart because he's pissed that Mozart is an infinitely better servant than him as a 1-star while he's a 3-star. He's an arts DPS who has pretty good crit damage with his new buff, but then again, if you wanted a crit Avenger, you have Jalter, and if you wanted an arts DPS Avenger, you have Spishtar, and I guess Kama Summer in like 2 years, but people love their edgy boys, so. Ruler Toria, 5-star Bunny Girl. Summer 4 is the event where DW insists that a Bunny Girl outfit is a swimsuit for some reason, but y'all are too horny to notice. Not that I blame you. She's a DPS ruler who has burst crit damage, except she can't make her own stars, at least not efficiently, and her stats would suggest that she's supposed to be more of a tank, which is a polite way of saying that her attack rating fucking sucks. Her unique gimmick, however, is a card shuffle skill that she ripped directly from your Mages Association Mystic Code because she couldn't figure out what kind of second skill she ought to have. And it did get a pretty useful buff that eliminates one teammate's face cards, which essentially means that you can guarantee a Brave Chain for one of the other 2 servants who still have the cards in your deck, but it's still RNG on who gets the Brave Chain anyway. In other words, use Ruler Toria only if you're thirstier than Sana is for Crony and you gotta have some bunny tits. Luvia, 4-star Arts DPS, specifically an Arts Crit ruler. Her real name is Astraea, but no one cares, call her Luvia. In true Luvia fashion, she couldn't stand how many servants Rin was getting in FGO and so decided to become one herself. Some people don't like her Ascension art, which is fine, but I prefer not to be unnecessarily autistic about art styles. She's one of the best crit damage servants in the game due to how cohesively her kit works to give her easy access to big crit damage, and it's even easier when she's supported in a proper arts team where she can even spam her crit damage burst windows. BB, 4-star support. Her name stands for Big Booba, but you probably knew that already. She's still the game's only single target Moon Cancer, even in JP, so you can use her as a sort of arts DPS against Avenger bosses, but she's more commonly used for her S1 that removes debuffs and gives a target a one-time debuff immunity, making her a crucial plug suit support for certain Scotty memers or as a possible esports servant for event challenge quests. Summer BB, 5-star Reloader. If regular BBs are called Big Booba, then Summer BB's real name is Super Big Booba. Genius, I know. Summer BB's gimmick is her card lock skill, which freezes your current hand for 3 turns so you can abuse Brave Chains if you get them, just like how she'll abuse the shit out of you. Trust me, I've read those dojins. Avenger Nobu, 5-star Whoa Mama. She's a Buster DPS with a full Berserker deck, which surprisingly is unique to her, but her intended gimmick is to beat up divine enemies with her NP that has a super effective mod against them. The only problem is that she loses attribute advantage against them too, which is kind of the same bruh moment as that one Rider gem that Shiokawa gave us that one time. She did get a buff that does give her additional damage against divine enemies when she's in a burning battlefield condition, which she could already trigger herself, but unfortunately by this point there's probably not much they can do to convince people to use Mama Nobu again, seriously, considering Spishtar exists. Mr. Dondo, 5-star Scotty meme. The first Avenger in the game, if you don't count Jalter. The perfect example of how any servant, no matter how bottom tier, can make a comeback and become relevant, and then fall back into absolute obscurity when Castoria shows up. He was one of 2 premier Scotty memers, him and Zerkalot, so if you have both of them, there's basically nothing you can't Scotty meme for most events, though admittedly, things are getting a little weird already, even for the events NA's getting these days. Just like Scotty herself, he'll catch a break from farming for about a year until Summer 6 brings everyone back out of retirement. Gorgon, 4-star Thick Snack. Medusa's final Pokemon evolution where she becomes a goddamn snack and a half. Also, no steppy please. She's a Buster crit meme without crit stars, so make sure to give her some so that she can shoop to whoop some bitches. Hessian Lobo, 4-star Good Boy. The absolute goodest of boys, along with Caval II. You're never really gonna use him, so give him all the head pats and doggy treats you can get. What do you mean there's a headless dude with him too? Jean, 5-star Support. Like Saber, she has a ton of her own clones now in FGO, but unlike Saber, she actually wants them. Like Ku and Herc, she was god tier at the beginning of the game because she was good at keeping your team alive, but sort of fell off once you realized that another way of keeping your team alive was just to kill all the enemies first. DW did buff her shitty second skill so that it now puts a double defense debuff onto one enemy, which is nice, but they're gonna need to do more than that if they really want to bring Jean up to the level of the other supports in the game, which probably won't happen, but then again, DW made Busters relevant again with Tomovich, so if they can do that, then who the fuck knows. Jalter, 5-star Buster DPS. Jean's edgy sister, courtesy of the guy who looks like a praying mantis, who claims that her edginess is not a phase and her favorite Linkin Park album is Hybrid Theory. She's the OG Buster crit meme even before Merlin was a thing, and to this day she still has the highest base attack rating in the entire game, and, until recently with Summer Comma at least, the only servant who has over 13,000 base attack rating. She was kind of falling off just because she's been around forever, so DW finally gave her an MP buff to kindly remind people that she's still a goddamn Buster crit meme and a half. Jinako, 5-star Moon Cancer. Why is she a Moon Cancer again? Fuck if I know, dude. She's a support Moon Cancer, specifically a tank with a 1-turn taunt and some party support skills to go with it, but just like Osakabe Hime, she'll probably just stay in her room playing video games all day because you have no use for her. Also, she's currently the only Moon Cancer who can spook you in permanent gacha, so don't freak out because you think you just rolled BB because you didn't. The real Hokusai, 5-star Arts DPS. Rumor has it that at one point, she and Ina were roommates. Thanks to her super effective mod against man attribute enemies, C2 is a great Arts DPS and fights where she can actually use it. In addition, she now has her own Starway buff just for her Arts cards and a Star Bomb skill to go with it to cement her as an Arts crit DPS on top of everything else. King Protea, 5-star Teddy Bear? I mean, if you have that weird fetish where you get off to giantess anime girls, then this is the perfect servant for you. But don't let her appearance trick you, cause she hits hard as fuck as a Buster DPS. Plus, she has a gimmick that lets her gain up to 40,000 extra max HP, and lets her remove those stacks to insta-charge her NP if she needs it. Yes, all the way up to 100% if she can. No, I didn't stutter. Summer Martha, 4-star Buster DPS. She'd like to ask if you have a few minutes to talk about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, otherwise she's gonna punch you in the fucking face. BB knows what that feels like. She's the only ruler in the game with a full Berserker deck, so it's rather ironic that her third Appen skill also gives her extra damage against Berserkers. She's also one of the only Summer Servants in the game to get a buff, let alone an NP buff like she got, so Summer Martha functions as a Buster DPS who's usually really hard to kill thanks to her ruler class. Also, don't let Superman or Batman find out that you put their mom in a swimsuit. Mash, 4-star Kohai, the one and only eggplant. Eat your veggies, kids. They're good for you. She starts off as a defensive support, then turns into a godlike support, then into whatever this is. No, Mash, your name is not Hutao, where you press E or Q and do a million fucking damage. Stick to your Camelot version. She does somehow have Black Barrel in JP now, which is probably the same shit that Gun God uses in Notes for some weird Nasuverse continuity bullshit, but that doesn't really make her a god either. Besides, Habitrot uses that shit better than she does. Mecha Liz, 4-star Kaiju meme. If you hate the original Liz just because of her personality, you might actually like this one. Probably Mark II because your personality would have to be just as bland as hers to hate the original. The mecha's probably don't like Liz either, so hey, at least you have that much in common. Since alter egos are the hard counter to foreigners, DW intended for Mecha Liz to be the free-to-play answer to Abby, who you fight in Salem, but good luck trying to get them now. For what it's worth, Mecha Liz is the only servant in the game that lets you have 3 copies of her on the field at the same time, since the game treats Mark 1 and Mark 2 as separate servants, even though they're identical gameplay-wise. Melt, 5-star butt. She could have been a guest character in Katawa Shoujo, but wasn't because she would have too easily been best girl. She's a quick DPS alter ego, and by extension, a quick crit DPS who tap dances on people's faces until they die. She also owes Crony a favor for doing the whole time travel bullshit back in the CCC event. MHXX, 4-star Virtualon reject. She single-handedly proves that even in a game with all kinds of swimsuits, sometimes the simplest ones are the hottest. She also has a name that makes her sound like some sort of fucking bootleg porn site, but that's besides the point. She's an arts DPS with a power mod against threat to humanity enemies, and since most foreigners are also threats to humanity, this makes her a hilariously viable option against other foreigners. And with her NP buff, she's also a decent option against Sabers too, just like her 5-star version is as well. She would be a good arts crit DPS too, if it weren't for the fact that her Starbomb skill didn't also reduce her own star weight at the same time. But that's okay, just look at her lickable belly. Oak to Alter, 5-star Buster DPS. Her whole character is based off the joke that she's sleepy all the damn time because of her name, and as someone whose sleep schedule doesn't exist, that's a damn mood and a half. She was known in JP as the best assassin in the game. Yes, I know, she's an alter ego, it's a joke. When she first debuted, because she had everything a top tier farmer needed at the time, and assassins with batteries were really rare. What could possibly go wrong? Passion Lip, 4-star Booba. She's a Buster DPS who can also function as a tank thanks to her taunt and defensive skills, but that's really about it. She does have Invo Pierce on her S3, which is nice, but it stuns her, so make sure to use her S1 first so that doesn't happen. She also jams out to that one crab rave song when she thinks no one's looking. Ruler Kets, 4-star Santa, apparently. This is Kets when she goes full degen on her wrestling addiction and somehow thinks that colony drops are a legitimate wrestling move. She's a rather unique crit flex ruler who can not only produce stars but also use them for herself or have someone else use them so long as they're not a berserker. The fact that she's a ruler also makes her hard to kill. What is difficult to do though is getting a damn rerun of her event because apparently it was a little too much of a Kinnikuman reference. Kiara, 5-star planet fucker, not to be confused with the phoenix who simps for a Grim Reaper. If she gives you a hard time, just throw a Shoto with a really deep voice at her. She's an arts DPS who doubles as both a challenge quest DPS thanks to her great sustain, and as a hardcore farmer thanks to her 50% battery, though that's not the only thing she's hardcore at. She works as a cam girl at Chaldea whenever she's not out farming and hangs out with Belial in her free time. Holmes, 5-star cocaine addict. Don't be fooled by his material requirements. It might say he doesn't need any void dust, but he'll be fucking snorting that shit whenever he can get his hands on it. Why else do you think you never have enough of it? He's an arts flex with the unique ability to give his team both Invo Pierce and Defense Pierce with his NP, along with an AoE defense debuff and crit damage buff, making him a potential esports servant for a challenge quest, albeit a rather expensive one. He can also go full Leroy Smith on your ass and pull out his cane to beat the shit out of you himself with arts crits of his own, though he usually reserves that for Moriarty if he can help it. Mothman, 5-star Hail China, Hail Britannia! Even without the power of his Gios Eye, Lelouch is a rare tank DPS who can solo a lot of challenge quests and late game fights and make them look like a total joke, which I guess should be expected of him in a world where he does become Emperor. Elsa, 5-star Polar Bear Lolly, but no, she doesn't want to build a snowman with you. She also has a lot in common with Lammy because they both hang out with a big white animal of their choice. She's an arts DPS who has a very similar gameplay style to Rad Vlad. In fact, you can consider her to be an alter ego version of him who trades half her damage viability for the ability to not die in 3 hits, which is pretty damn nice, I'm not gonna lie. And she's sick and tired of all your stale jailbait jokes. Another year, another how-to. Sorry that this one was so late in comparison to previous years. This year and the last has been pretty crazy for me IRL, so trying to keep up with all my gotchas and manage everything else in between has been difficult for me to say the least. Let's just hope that this isn't some sort of pattern where every year the next how-to gets more and more delayed compared to the last. Anyways, let me do my usual shill here at the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel here. I've got a few videos lined up for the future that'll take God knows how long to finish though. I also stream on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/ToeSniper98. I stream FGO, Genshin, and occasionally some other gachas if I have the time. I also write fanfic in what little spare time I do have. The one I'm currently working on is called 5 Equal Angels, which is an AU quintessential quintuplets fanfic that has a bit of a crossover with the Nasuverse. I haven't updated in about 2 months, but I do plan to get another chapter out once this video is finished. That's it for me. Here's to another year for NA and JPFGO, and as always, thanks for watching.